Hello, everyone, and thanks for giving us your time today for VR Download. I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, joined today by David Heaney in London. Oops, let me fix that again. As we talk about the next steps, I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, joined by David Heaney in London in the UploadVR studios as we talk about the next steps in personal computing. We're wearing Quest 3 headsets today. I think David has a Quest 3S with last generation Meta avatars. We're using hand tracking with built-in microphones, and we've got tablets in front of us that show us notes and comments so we can interact with our audience when we're live. Thank you to our patrons for supporting the work we do over on UploadVR.com. In case this is your first time here, welcome to virtual reality. You've arrived right on time. We've been following VR's development closely for more than a decade, and we can expect decades of progress ahead of us. You can become a paying member at uploadvr.com to support our work directly. We thank our patrons by name here on this podcast and listed on the website. That includes XR Developer News, HoloNet, Justin Corcoran, Richard Parmesan, Nick Levac, Qubits, Steve Lucas, David Y. DuPont, and Soul Presence. Sincerely, thank you all for your support. Hello to everyone out there. Please feel free to share where you're watching from in our comments. Hello to our time travelers catching us at different times and speeds, and those of us watching us through a universal translator into their native language. David, what do we have today?
Hello, everyone. So, if this season wasn't busy enough in this industry with Meta Ray-Ban display, the M5 Apple Vision Pro, Samsung Galaxy XR, we now have Valve officially announcing Steam Frame. After years of Deckard rumors, and yes, this is the headset that was codenamed Deckard while in development. We'll mention later how Ian saw the word Deckard in the menu system. It's official, it's real, it's shipping in early 2026. So let's start by talking about what it is. I'll run down what we're going to do in this special. We're going to basically have 4 sections, but it's not going to be as strong as that. It'll be a little bit loose. We're going to firstly tell you what it is. What is Steam Frame as a headset and as a product? Then we're going to talk about our hands-on impressions of Steam Frame. Ian and I both tried it at Valve HQ, where we got to talk to Valve team members on the project and get the information firsthand so that we can bring you the accurate rundown of what Steam Frame is and how it is to use. Thirdly, we're going to talk about why did Valve make Steam Frame? And Ian will talk about some of the discussions he had there, some of the quotes he got from Valve that are really interesting and tell you what this company's plans are for this industry and beyond. And then finally, we will talk about the game situation, because if you go to uploadvr.com right now, you'll see that we just put up an article about the fact that Valve has confirmed to Road to VR that they are currently not working on a new VR game. So let's just get straight in there, unless there's anything you want to say before we start, Ian.
No, that sounds like a good plan. I will keep an eye on the comments for recurring questions, but I will say that David's structure here makes a lot of sense, right? So he will try to keep us on task there. And so if you see someone who asks a question that we address earlier in the show, it would be helpful if you tell them that they can go back earlier in the stream to get that question answered for them, so they don't keep spamming the chat. And we'll try to keep David's structure here. So why don't you walk us through it?
Sure. So Steam Frame is a standalone headset. It has computing hardware on board, a chip that's slightly more powerful than the one in Quest 3. You could, in theory, buy it even if you don't own a gaming PC. However, Valve is describing it as a streaming-first standalone headset. And that means that primarily they do intend you to use it with a gaming PC. In the box of Steam Frame that you get when you purchase it as a product, you will find no cable for display, but you will find a wireless adapter that plugs into your PC. And this is core to how the product is intended to work for PC VR. So while you may already be familiar with using your Quest or Pico or other standalone headset for wireless compression streaming for PC VR, Valve is trying to really optimize this and make it the best possible experience it can be by creating a dedicated point-to-point connection between the headset and your PC. So let's run down exactly how that happens. So the adapter itself is not making the hotspot. The headset is making the hotspot. And Valve actually has put two distinct Wi-Fi radios on the headset, one of which will connect to your home Wi-Fi network for downloads and updates and other internet connectivity for the headset itself, for the SteamOS that it's running. The other of which will connect directly to this wireless adapter on the 6 gigahertz channel. So you're getting a high bandwidth, dedicated, reserved 6 gigahertz link between the headset and your PC. And on a software level, Valve handles making this all happen automatically. There's no, hotspot configuration. You plug it in, and SteamVR is getting a dedicated wireless link to the SteamFrame headset, while the headset's other radio is handling its general wireless connection. Because this is, again, a standalone system. It is running SteamOS, but again, Valve describes it as a PC streaming first experience. So the other thing that they've done to really optimize the PC VR streaming experience is foveated streaming. So SteamFrame has built-in eye tracking, and Valve on a system level is getting the compression streaming to prioritize resolution and quality where you're looking. Now, this is something that has actually been available in the Steam Link app for Quest Pro for almost 3 years now. However, this is actually a refined and improved version of that. Valve did not have, access to the Quest Pro's operating system, but it does have full access to this OS, and on a system OS level, it is driving this foveated streaming with very, very low latency. It is fundamental to how it works. So this is a headset that is very much so optimized to make this experience that a lot of us have already been using of wireless PC VR using Wi-Fi to be the most optimal possible experience it can be. So let's talk a little bit about specs, unless there's something you want to say there.
Read out a couple comments. I guess people are starting to get into it. I'm really appreciating our regular viewers out there. Be nice to the new people who do come in and maybe have questions that we asked, like we cover earlier in the show, or might have newbie questions that we didn't cover. We do want to address them. But I loved everyone is sort of commenting on the different specs, trying to get their minds around what's going on here. But I like Bar's comment. I wanted to call that. What will PC VR gamers do when they can't talk about problems connecting their headset to their PC?
Yeah, I mean, look, we've been saying this on this show a lot, that if you are a super PC VR enthusiast who went out and bought a dedicated Wi-Fi 7 router and you have it set up in your room, you might be thinking, why do I need this? And Valve has told us you can still use your setup if you want. They're not going to stop you from doing so. But you have to remember that a lot of people are in the situation where their router is the one that their ISP supplied to them 10 years ago. And it's actually 3 rooms down the hall where there are a bunch of solid walls in the way. And to make matters worse, half their family is using it for, Netflix and video calls and all this, where all this traffic is going through this cheap little ISP router. And so, yes, for some people, wireless VR via compression streaming is already great. For most people, it isn't. And we have been saying this at UploadVR in this show for years now. I've been saying that this is the solution that's needed. And I'm very glad to see that Valve has just had the gumption to say, we're going to do it. It's right there in the box. Look at this box. It's so beautifully simplistic. The headset, the controllers, and the wireless adapter for your PC. But let's dig into some of the specs of the headset just so we can get through the what it is before we talk about our impressions. So it has this lightweight modular design where there's no battery in the visor, but the compute itself is in the visor. So you have a Snapdragon chip there that we'll talk about soon. Valve has managed to deeply optimize the weight distribution here and really shave off every gram possible. That same idea of big screen, but in a standalone headset. You can see the core module here with the compute, the lenses, and the displays is actually only 185 grams, not that much more than a big screen beyond, and yet has, a compute and RAM and cooling fans for this compute and RAM in there. So that's really remarkable. The entire unit that you see here, including the default but removable strap and facial interface and rear battery, weighs 440 grams. So even that, the entire thing is a solid almost 100 grams less than something like a Quest 3. There's some really clever industrial design and mechanical engineering going on here to pull that off. So when it comes to the lenses and displays, these are 2K LCD displays behind pancake lenses. From a visual perspective, you're getting roughly as many pixels as a Quest 3, and the lenses have quite similar optical properties to a Quest 3. So on a kind of display system architecture uh, perspective here, this is very similar to something like a Meta Quest 3. And you dial the IPD with a little wheel at the top. Again, very similar to Quest 3, just it has its little wheel there at the bottom. So on the standalone level, you can run Linux applications. This is running SteamOS, a Linux-based OS. However, unlike the Steam Deck, this is an ARM-based system. It's not x86, right? This is an ARM mobile chipset. So how do you run Windows applications? The answer is that Valve has been heavily investing in a project called FEX, F-E-X, and it allows x86 to ARM emulation, where it actually passes through a lot of the low-level graphics API stuff through directly to the hardware rather than needing to emulate that. And so you can, if you want, without even connecting this to a PC, you can go into Steam and run a regular Steam VR title. Now, as we have been saying at UploadVR for years, there is no magic that makes a headset like this that's using 10 watts or something like that as powerful as your 600-watt PC. So there will be a Steam Frame verified program on Steam where you can see which titles are actually going to run well. To give you an example here, the Half-Life Alyx that we were shown was running on a gaming PC streamed. This is not designed to run Half-Life Alyx standalone. We're super curious to see what actually would happen. That's not something we had time to try, but theoretically you could try it. I think the idea here from the indication Valve's giving is that it's not going to run that well. So what kind of performance are we talking about here? I'm going to try and get through the what is it as quickly as possible. This uses a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 chipset. It is 1 year newer than the 8 Gen 2, which is what the XR2 Gen 2 is roughly based on. So you can see here on this chart, you're getting around 25 to 30% extra GPU performance compared to like a Quest 3. And so, yes, this is going to be the most powerful non-Apple standalone headset on the market, assuming nothing else pops up between now and its launch. This is paired with 16 gigabytes of RAM, which is double what you get in a Quest 3, the same you get in a Galaxy XR. You don't need base stations for this headset. It is entirely computer vision. It's inside-out tracking via 4 grayscale cameras that are positioned in a somewhat similar position to what you see on something like a Meta Quest 2, right? You've got, I'll try and get an image here that shows that, you've got 2 cameras at the kind of top corners, as well as 2 cameras spaced out low on the front. These 2 frontal cameras can also be used for pass-through. It's not color pass-through. It is grayscale pass-through, monochrome. You can kind of recolor it a bit, but it's fundamentally monochrome and low resolution. This is not a mixed reality headset. That's something that's really interesting, or at least not by default. There is an expansion port in Steam Frame that can support dual MIPI camera inputs as well as PCIe Gen 4. So in theory, someone could actually make an accessory that attaches on and adds on color pass-through or face tracking or depth sensors. We're going to be really interested to see what happens here, because obviously when it came to the Index, its front expansion port didn't get used much, but I think this is a lot higher bandwidth than the Index expansion port. It's right under here that this goes. You could add whatever kind of sensors you might want after launch. So I could easily see, this becoming a mixed reality headset for people who want that, but that's not the focus out of the box. The last thing we should cover just before we move on to talking about the headset is the controllers. They are very Quest Touch Plus like. They are very, very similar, with the notable exception that 2 notable exceptions. One, they have all of the ABXY buttons on the right controller and a D-pad on the left controller, as well as on the other side of the controllers, you have a bumper as well as just a regular trigger. So why is this done? The answer may seem kind of obvious. The answer is that it has full parity with a regular gamepad. So without needing to pair a gamepad or without needing to carry around a gamepad with you if you're traveling, Steam Frame has all of the inputs needed to play your flat screen Steam library as well. And again, because this is Steam OS, because this has got Proton for Windows to Linux and FEX for x86 to ARM, you can go on Steam and download, Windows only games. How well they'll run is going to be highly variable, right? We're talking mostly, I think, about perhaps a game like Stardew Valley or something. You're going to get some things more graphically simple, but it has the inputs that are needed. And obviously, when you're streaming from your PC, this is still used. So Valve has not yet said what Steam Frame will be priced at, other than saying that they are aiming for it to be cheaper than the Index. I think going into speculation mode here and being clear that we're now speculating, I would guess we're talking something on the order of $800, but that is only my guess.
There's a couple of accessories here. I'm looking at our comments. I see Guy Godin, the creator of Virtual Desktop, in our audience. Thank you for tuning in today. I was thinking of you, and you commented at the precise time that I was sort of thinking about what you might say, right? So you say out there, who would have thought the idea of streaming desktop games and PC VR games from a computer would be a good one? So I'm very appreciative that we have the creator of Virtual Desktop in our audience today to sort of be part of this conversation. Thank you for popping in. I see our audience going up over 200 people now, and our audience does build over time over the course of our discussion. We're gonna end up in a free-form discussion by the end of this. There's no way around it. But I am loving all the comments, and everyone's sort of all over the board about those cameras, how they're having lots of feelings about their cameras. They're having lots of feelings about the display. They're going to want to walk through every one of those with us.
One last thing I forgot to mention on the controllers. I mentioned difference one, the extra inputs, right? The D-pad and the bumpers. The other difference I forgot to say out loud was that they have capacitive sensing on the handles, index style, as well as capacitive sensing on all the buttons. So the other thing I should say actually is that they have more IR LEDs than Touch Plus. So Touch Plus, the controllers in Quest 3 and 3S, have 8 IR LEDs, mostly on the face, 7 on the face. This is 18 in total, all over the handle. So this is going to be very, very resistant to occlusion because it's always going to be able to see at least a couple of these IR LEDs unless it's completely blocked with the controller. So yeah, it's interesting to see where this product is positioned. It is essentially, we're talking about something that is like a souped up Quest 3 in some ways, very heavily optimized for PC VR, on a software level dramatically different because it's running this, SteamOS Linux-based PC software. Something that Valve repeatedly said to us, and that you repeatedly kind of were discussing with them, is this is a PC. Theoretically, again, we're talking about it's streaming first. It's designed for using your gaming PC, but theoretically, you can buy this and use this as an entirely standalone PC.
Yeah, I'm seeing Guy out there saying that they hit that button for a dev kit. I've already heard from several devs who are in that queue trying to get that dev kit. They went straight for that button. You can imagine that Valve probably already has at least hundreds of applications in front of them already for dev kits, and they're going to have to be very selective in their planning, depending on sort of what hardware they have available to them. We're going to talk about this from so many angles, and I just want to be respectful to sort of. We had a question from Parmesan earlier. He donated some money to us, and thank you so much. Parmesan's always there every week watching us. Thank you so much for tuning in. They were asking about the display in particular, I believe, and I can't remember if we've run through the specs there already, but that they really wanted to know some of that stuff. And I'm so excited to talk more about the PC streaming stuff that Guy is sort of already teasing about.
Yeah, so we did run through the display, but just again, in case anyone missed it, it's a 2160 by 2160 LCD for each eye. So it is a 2K LCD. It is essentially very similar in resolution to Quest 3. It's, 2% more pixels. It's pretty much the same resolution. And just to be clear, those are regular LCDs. There's no mini LED backlighting. There's no, local dimming of any kind. There's no quantum dot layer. These are regular old LCDs. And I think that's definitely the most controversial thing, because let's just address the elephant in the room. In all of the responses I've seen so far on social media and in our comments, a lot of people were hoping for, micro OLED, maybe not 4K micro OLED, because we know that means a $2,000 or $3,000 headset, but maybe a 2.5K micro OLED people were hoping for. And I guess Valve is in a tough spot here because it wants to create a premium experience, of course, but it also has to be affordable. And we have to realize that if we step outside our kind of enthusiast bubble, for a lot of people, as soon as a headset, a VR headset's price gets into 4 digits, as soon as there are 4 digits in that price, a lot of people just tune out and they don't care. And there's a fundamentally limited market there. You have to remember the context here, right? When the Oculus Rift and HTC Vive launched, people were shocked and annoyed at the $800 total price points there and calling this, really, really high. Even if this is 800, that's my speculation. Valve's only said it's probably aiming to be cheaper than Index full kit. If it's, say, 800, that's still a lot of money for a lot of people. And so that's a tough spot. But I do wonder, why not a Steam Frame Pro as well? And we pushed them on this. We said, are you working on a Steam Frame Pro? Do you think about it? They kind of teased that they think about HDR every day. A lot of these same people worked on the Steam Deck OLED. They love OLED. They know the advantage of OLED. But look, these headsets take years to make. These are difficult projects. In some ways, it's a miracle that this thing even is getting out the door. And I don't know. I think
it's not out the door yet, right? I mean, it's what we. So I'm looking at these comments, and everyone is talking about that price and the displays, and I want to harness Guy Godin, the creator of Virtual Desktop's expertise in our comments, give them space to respond, because I want to ask. You've had a product that has streamed flat games in addition to PC VR games, but flat games at high frame rates to headsets. And as I understand it, you don't put tracking software in virtual desktops, so you don't really know necessarily how people use your software. But what would be your guess as to the cost, the amount of money that you've made from people who are just playing flat games at extremely high frame rates above 60 frames per second? And I want to begin to start our audience thinking about the value of seeing their flat games at 90 or 120 frames per second.
I think that's a fascinating approach here. I keep talking about this in a VR context, but you're right in that this, from a product positioning, is kind of just as focused on your flat screen games. The one point of skepticism I have here is that for me, I obviously own a bunch of different headsets of all kinds of resolutions and display types. I don't really want to play my flat screen games on a 2K LCD. I do want to play them on a 4K micro OLED. So I guess coming back to the kind of, display type issue, for me, that makes it not that much less appealing for VR, because I can still enjoy VR games on a Quest 3 or anything lower resolution than that even. A lot of VR games, it's not hugely the point, but when it comes to these flat screen titles, these are designed to be played on, giant TVs. And when you're playing it on a giant screen, the lower the resolution, the worse it's going to look. You want it to be on a 4K virtual screen. I'm not going to play flat screen games on this personally. I'm going to play it on the Galaxy XR or Vision Pro. Not just because of the resolution, but also because of the OLED, right? Like, why would I choose to play on a 2K LCD when I have a 4K screen on other headsets? But also, if I'm a regular person, you're going to have a 4K TV in your living room, right? A 4K OLED in many cases.
I mean, this is replacing I pointed this out in my article, and so we did get a response out there from Guy pretty quickly to my question out there, saying that they've sort of supported the same thing since 2018. And their estimate, their just rough guess, looking at their audience, is flat games are around 5% of virtual desktop use. Videos is about 5% of virtual desktop use, and then 90% of virtual desktop use would be PC VR games.
As a guess, he doesn't collect analytics.
Yeah, he's guessing right there. It's just gut reaction, right? He's not collecting analytics. It's really interesting to think that what Valve might be releasing here in Steam Frame is like geared toward 95% flat games being seen at higher frame rates, and then also you get a bunch of VR games over time as developers bring their optimization up to snuff.
I don't know. I really disagree with that. I think fundamentally it's a VR headset, right? Like, yes, of course, flat games is a big part of it, but it's a VR headset. And I see a comment here from LL making a great point that the other reason you might not want to play your flat games on this is that it has low resolution black and white pass through, right? When I am playing my Steam games on Apple Vision Pro, I've got, the iPad Steam Link app or one of the third-party alternatives on a giant screen, and I'm in my own room, right? I can easily, grab my drink and keep awareness of everything around me. With this, to be clear, like, this is not just black and white pass through, it's low resolution. It's like Quest 2 quality, a bit better than that pass through. It's not, so you're going to be in a virtual environment, sure, but you're not getting, the kind of keyboard cutout or gamepad breakthrough that you get in Vision Pro, or the kind of hand cutout. I don't know. I mean, maybe we disagree on this, but I think to me, this seems like a really great wireless VR headset. It doesn't seem like a great flat screen headset to me.
A great flat. What? That's not. No, I mean, my point is, all right. Gosh, there's so many things to get into here. I want to pay respect to the commenter. It was like Pixel somewhere earlier in the conversation. I can't scroll up on the comments really easily right now, but Pixel earlier in the show mentioned that Valve is doing the thing I outlined on a previous version of this podcast, and I want to talk about this model that is a dream for me, right? I've got Steam VR Home open on my Steam machine, sitting over there on a desk. And the moment someone comes and joins my Steam VR Home, it pops up on my TV a mirror from inside of Steam VR Home where I see the person milling around in my space as a headset and seeing their controllers moving around in my space. And I hear their voice coming out of my Steam Frame headset sitting over there plugged in. I go grab it, put it on, and I'm instantaneously, from the moment it hits my face, in there with that person who's in my virtual room right here. That's years away from being implemented or even being feasible with what this hardware is today. But there is a path there where you're achieving frame rates for your core gameplay library that you could not achieve on a big 70-inch television that tops out at 60-inch that it tops out at 60 hertz. You're talking about going back to this core issue of displays, right? A person has money to upgrade one display in their life per year, let's say, right? You upgrade the TV this year, you upgrade the computer monitor next year, maybe the TV in the bedroom the next year. Here you've got a chance to make a different choice about how you upgrade that cycle. And it includes flat screen gaming on a giant screen right above your ceiling. And yeah, there's other things you could get instead, but this has all the benefits that we've talked about Vision Pro having, except focused on gaming. You don't have to bother your partner with any light. The controllers could potentially be under the covers where the clacking of the buttons won't bother your partner's audio as you're playing the game in bed on this giant virtual screen.
Well, it's interesting you said all the benefits of Vision Pro in this regard, except for the 4K micro OLED displays, which is what makes me want to do that in the first place, right? My view here, some people say, VR headsets aren't good for flat screen. What's the point? Like, we have real screens. And other people say, I've been using a virtual screen since my, Oculus Go or something like that. There's those two extremes. My position is in the middle. It's that it is good, but with sufficient resolution, right? Like, this is not, I mean, we both used it. It's not high resolution. It's Quest 3 resolution, maybe even a little bit less when you consider the slightly wider field of view on the vertical perspective, at least. And, if we want to just kind of get into our impressions at this point, and we'll just kind of go freeform, I guess, like the contrast isn't great either. Okay. So I find like the streaming quality great here. I didn't see any compression artifacts, right? They've really, really tuned this in with the foveated streaming. The lenses are sharp and clear. They're Quest 3-like in that you get a clear image over the entire lens wide eye box, but what you see through those lenses is an LCD panel. And it's, to be clear, that's what most Steam VR users see because they use a Quest 2 or a Quest 3 or a Quest 3S, right? That's what they already see. But most of them bought their headset for $300. And I think if you're asking people to start spending this amount of money, you want it to be a gorgeous screen. And look, I think this is an amazing headset in what it does for wireless PC VR, but it's not a gorgeous screen. It just isn't. And that's why for me, I'm always going to want to play my games on the beautiful screen, And there are a lot of monitors and TVs now that are 120, 144, and you can get them for ridiculously low prices. It's astonishing how low price some TVs that are these days, and that's why I don't know, I'm skeptical on that. While I'm bullish on this as a VR headset, I think it's excellent if you want to do, for the reason that people buy Quest headsets today for Steam VR, for people who are PC gamers. They just want to get onto Steam VR in one click. I think this makes that even better, and that's the kind of core focus here. But I'm fascinated to see what people think when they get the product next year.
So there's maybe if I'm there's so many things going on in our comments here. Did we cover field of view? Someone asked. Valve did not define it exactly. They did say it was smaller than Index, and talked about the measurement of it at length with us.
They said it's slightly less than Index. The number they give conservatively is 110 by 110, 110 horizontal, 110 vertical. It seemed to me to be horizontally very similar to Quest 3 and vertically ever so slightly higher. And I think the vertical field of view really, really matters in a product like this. I don't think you're going to be that disappointed by the field of view. It's going to be a tiny bit less than Index, according to Valve, and that does seem true. But I think you're going to get a clearer image in a larger area than Index, right? So with Index, those are Fresnel lenses. You were not getting sharpness in the periphery. If you want to actually look with your eyes or the noise needing to turn your head, this is going to be a superior optical experience. And resolution-wise, it's twice as many pixels as the Index.
So I need to talk about a couple. So if I'm losing the frame rate argument on some things that people, I wrote it on, go read our articles, but I pointed it out. How many people don't have a concept out there of the impact that it has on their enjoyment of a game to go from 60 to 90 or to go from 90 to 100. And to be clear, on a flat screen, 70-inch or 60-inch monitor floating there virtually. I don't think people have any conception here. I'm seeing a lot of people saying this is dead on arrival. But let's drop the frame rate argument for a minute and talk about the milliseconds that it takes for your inputs to have an effect on a game. I'm also convinced that when people feel even 2 to 3 milliseconds difference on input being seen in effect on a game, seeing what they press a button delayed by a couple milliseconds will be felt by a large segment of the audience. And a big part of what Valve has announced is a wireless dongle to attach between the Steam controller and other and PC systems, as well as all this dedicated hardware to manage all this wireless that Gigo and the Genius developer virtual desktop has wrangled out there on their own for the better part of a decade, right? They're trying to manage all of that so that you get a few more milliseconds and more frames in front of your eyes that you might not perceptibly realize is there. You just feel it. You put this thing on and it just, in addition to it being lighter weight than any headset you've tried, in addition to every second it's on your face, not weighing you down the way a Quest battery does, you're perhaps enjoying your traditional content in ways you didn't before because a little bit of lag has been shaved off in these ways.
Look, I strongly agree with you that high frame rate gaming is amazing, both for flat screen and for VR. It's even more impactful in VR in my view, but for flat screen, it's amazing going from 60 to 120 to 144. The problem is that in 2025, going into 2026, you can get a high frame rate monitor for a couple of $100s. And pretty much every TV on the market now supports 120 hertz. On PlayStation 5, a lot of games now support 120. Xbox is the same. It's There was a time years and years ago, when the Valve Index launched, for example, when high refresh rate was not unique to headsets, but there were far fewer traditional screens that could do this. But we're in an era where every smartphone in the market has 120 hertz. A bunch of laptops do. A bunch of Steam Deck OLED can do 90, for example, and a bunch of monitors and TVs. So I don't think like on its own that's going to be a reason to go out and buy a speculatively $800 headset. But I want to just keep repeating that I do think being able to play virtual reality games without a cable is, fundamentally look at this from a product perspective compared to Index. Index, you buy this headset, you have to mount these base stations up in the corner of your room. It has a tether that goes into your PC, this big thick tether that you're going to run over it with the wheel of your chair and stand on it. And the one thing I think here is that this product is an admission that Valve understands that people want wireless VR. There are holdouts that are dedicated to the cable, but as we've been saying for years, it's clear what the market wants. Look at the Steam hardware survey. It is amazing to go into VR and be able to just be wireless. Just pick up the headset, jump into your games, whether they be standalone or the full fidelity of a PC. And I think that's the focus here, right? You put this thing on, you get into VR, and you're straight into Steam. That's the kind of pitch here that I think it's such a massive upgrade from a product perspective over Index, while being higher resolution, and having these lighter controllers that are more reliable, et cetera, et cetera.
So, you've had the Galaxy XR a few days. Is the menu running at 72 hertz? The whole
Yes.
system?
Yeah.
And then you pop open Virtual Desktop and it's running at 90 hertz. And I don't think I've seen such a stark A/B test for frame rate, even after using headsets for years. Like, I've never seen just such an instant, oh, why did it feel so bad before? Why does this feel so good? And I'm talking about the difference between 72 frames per second versus 90 frames per second, 72 hertz versus 90 hertz. And I'm trying to convince a lot of people out there that seeing your games represented at 90 hertz going from 72 or 60 is going to be phenomenal. And we need to take a breath and just go. Steam is the one place that can really turn all the knobs to make that possible for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, as I was saying, PS5 Pro, a lot of games now are supporting 120. I think the same thing on the higher end Xbox as well. But I agree, it's going to be great to be able to portably do that, right? To be able to bring, Stardew Valley with you on a plane and sit in this thing and do it at 120 or even 144 hertz. We haven't said yet, but just like Index, this is 144 hertz experimental mode. When it comes to VR, what frame rate you can achieve is going to be down to your gaming PC. How much did you spend on your graphics card? What graphic settings do you want? This is a fundamentally PC streaming first product, and it's going to fundamentally primarily be used for gaming PC. If you want to invest in a 5090, you can run some of these VR games at 144 completely wirelessly on a headset like this. I just want to go through a couple of questions here from people. See some people asking, is the USB dongle sold separately? No, it's designed to be used for Steam Frame. It automatically pairs with the hotspot that Steam Frame makes. LL asked, did Valve say anything about 3D-ifying flat games? No, we talked to them about it. They don't have anything to announce at this time. I saw someone ask, can you play PC VR games on this without a PC? You can, and they run. But the key word is run. This is a headset that is slightly more powerful than a Quest 3. It is orders of magnitude less powerful than a NVIDIA 5090. Whether it runs well is going to depend on the game, right? So if you go to Ian's hands-on and he can talk about this, there are standalone games that you can run there are PC VR games that you can run standalone, no conversion, no developer effort needed, but you're not going to run, these big blockbuster VR games, Skydance Behemoth and stuff like that. Half-Life Alyx is not designed to run standalone. We are going to try when we have a headset at home. We're going to see what happens, but it was very, very notable that Valve demoed Half-Life Alyx to us running on a gaming PC streamed via the wireless adapter. This is not a product designed for playing Half-Life Alyx without a PC at this time. That said, they didn't rule out, optimizing Half-Life Alyx, which would mean, presumably downscaling the quality of the assets and things like that. This is, look, fundamentally, folks, it does have standalone capabilities, but it's a wireless VR headset.
Technic. Ian doesn't seem to realize 120 hertz monitors have been available for over 10 years and can be had for $200. Nobody's going to buy this as a first or 10th choice to experience high frame rates. All of those TVs and monitors, you measure their weight in grams. The display I'm discussing is not measured in it doesn't have weight. It's weightless. It's a virtual display. It goes anywhere. It's a different thing. And so like you can't compare it. You can't do that kind of art. You can't. So I'm looking at our comments and and people are like, I'm going to buy one, and also people are like, I am not interested, and they're all over the. There's a large story here for Valve to kind of convince gamers of, and I think what we're seeing here is the collision of the Quest gaming audience with the Valve Index buying audience. We have a lot of people who had Valve Index headsets or even HTC Vive headsets. They had that experience. They're waking up today and popping into our channel and going, what is this? Is this Valve Index 2? Right? That was literally one of our lines of conversation with Valve, was sort of discussing that subject and why it isn't a Valve Index 2. Why they made a conscious decision to put Steam in the name, right? This is centering Steam inside of VR in every way that they possibly can. Yeah, is there anything in the comments you want to talk about real quick before we talk? But like, D1360 is coming to my defense on Red Dead Redemption 2 is immersive in flat when they get above 90 FPS, and I love that you're describing immersion by a flat screen just because you're going up to high frame rates, and that's what I'm starting to think about here is where can I put my games where they're rendering at maybe absurd frame rates and then getting streamed to me at some subset of that. Like anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting idea. I think especially for something like portability, right? If you are someone who travels a lot, you can take this thing in your backpack. It's very, very portable. As Ian showed in his article, the battery strap is obviously hard, but the side straps here are soft elastic. So you can actually just push this in and look at how portable this thing becomes because it's soft on the other side. It's designed not to hurt the lenses. It's got this really soft Valve Index padding. So you can put this in a backpack really easily, start playing your games on a giant screen on a plane, when you get to the hotel room, you obviously aren't going to bring your whole console and start plugging it into the TV, but you can just lie there in the bed and have your Steam controllers there and start playing these giant games. I agree with you that, there is an appealing product here. It's just, there are big questions here about the black and white pass-through background, the 2K LCD screens. I see someone here saying that Norm from Tested, now this commenter says that the screens suck. I doubt that Norm from Tested used those words, but I gotta say that I was not impressed by the displays myself. These weren't good. If anything, they looked maybe even a little bit worse than Quest 3. Maybe the pixel fill factor was a bit worse. Like, these are not gorgeous displays. The contrast was not good at all, to be frank. I was in the sewers of City 17 and Half-Life Alyx. The details were just getting crushed in the darkness. I don't know. I'm skeptical to see whether this can really be called a premium product. Valve kept calling it a premium product, and it kept, for me, flying in the face that, like, this thing is a LCD with no local dimming. That's okay at $300. It's kind of okay at $500, but we'll criticize Quest 3 all the time. If this is $800, $900, is it okay? I don't know.
I'm loving all of our commenters and Geek Odin saying the modularity of the head strap is kind of nice. I'm happy that it doesn't use a rigid strap. And to be clear to some of our viewers who I think had some misunderstanding here, I laid down in this. This is David here, but quickly took a selfie of him because I just put the headset on and I went and laid down on their couch and I watched a movie on a YouTube screen for a little while, and it felt delightful on my head to lay down fully reclined with a pillow behind my head, using this laying against the pillow, the other cushion on the other side. This is a pillow on the back of your head. It feels fantastic. And so this I don't I came out of this experience and then was like wowed, quite literally wowed. And then Valve representatives come over and talk to me, and I'm like, I don't think I've experienced that before, laying down comfortably with a battery behind my head. And you wouldn't imagine it works, but it does phenomenally. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I think we really need to underscore here how excellent the ergonomics are of this headset. So people are getting really focused on the displays, and we're going to have to just move past that because it is what it is. You all understand now. It's a 2K LCD. It is. But as a headset, the design here, the industrial design, the ergonomics are incredible. This front box, the visor without the straps and facial interface, is 185 grams. It feels so damn light. It feels so comfortable. This is the most comfortable, fully functional headset I've ever worn. And I can only say that from a short experience, right? You know, we always say on this show, we'll let you know what it's like after hours and hours in our home. And we'll give you a full review, obviously, when it's actually out next year. But the comfort of this thing's incredible. It's so light on the front. It feels so much lighter. I saw someone ask, why would you get this over a Quest 3? I would, for my initial feeling, this feels so much better on my head than a Quest 3. It felt like almost like big screen beyond level comfort, which is astonishing for something that is a fully functional headset, no base stations, inside out tracking, actual onboard compute. And then this is a genius, default strap. And it is default. It's modular, like Quest. You can take it off and replace it. And Valve's going to make the CAD designs available for anyone to build whatever they want. But this default one is really, really, really nice because, as Ian's saying, you get a counterbalance. You have a battery here, so you take weight off here, and the sides are kind of this cloth fabric that's deformable with this kind of soft cushioning. And one thing that Valve has done better than anyone else in this entire industry, and I wonder how the hell they've done it. Do they have some sort of magic sauce when it comes to fabric, or do they have, a patent on it? Is the material. To this day, after trying dozens of headsets, I still find the padding material on the Valve Index to be the most comfortable. And they have improved it. They've refined it with the Steam frame and made it even better. It is so delightful to wear this thing on your head. Delightful is the word I'd use. It is just ergonomically a brilliant headset. I love the design. Valve has done things with industrial design here.
Yeah, so Sampler isn't leaning back uncomfortable. No, it's a delight. And that's absurd, right? You do not realize that at first glance. So get your pitchforks back, hold them back a little bit and breathe a little bit, because number one, go ahead.
I was just going to support your point by saying why it is, because people are so skeptical. Let me just support your point on the technical level. This is a curved battery. I think 2 curved battery cells, if I'm remembering correctly.
It's the dual cells, yeah.
Yes. So it's the reason it's not a really harsh, rigid feeling is that this is a really slim and light back battery unit. You have this unbelievably comfortable material that deforms in just the right way to keep enough support while also letting you go back. The side straps are not rigid. And yeah, it's curved so that it kind of like cushions your head and goes into the cushion. It's not the problem when you don't have a curved battery and you have these rear batteries is that it's this kind of rectangular thing that's kind of pushing in the wrong way. This, as Ian's describing, kind of just pushes into the cushion that you're lying into. We keep, it's a theme recently, right? The companies are figuring out how do we get the benefits of a counterbalance and the ability to lean back. Apple did it by using a soft strap that has tungsten inserts. Valve has done it by just a series of clever design approaches. This curved dual cell battery, 2 curved batteries that are kind of perfectly designed to cushion the back of your head. This material that deforms just enough to let you lean back, but not too much to not be enough support. And it's relatively lightweight and small. Something that doesn't actually come across very well in these large photos is how damn compact this headset is. It is really, really quite small. It is not I'm trying to find a good image that shows you kind of context. There's this one Ian took of it beside a steam machine, but the steam machine's really small itself, so you don't really know context there. Maybe this makes it a little bit more clear here when we show it the whole
Te-
family.
techno glitch. Better, cool, but I've never laid in bed, not even once in VR, ever. And I want you to sit and think about what you've said. Like, I want you to just bask in your feelings and check with yourself why you've never done that, right? It's because these design choices haven't been made by anyone.
Yeah, I think you need a headset you want to, right? Out of the box, a Quest headset will. But what do most of you, if you are an enthusiast, do when you get your Quest headset? You rip off the cloth strap and put something on that can actually support the weight. With this headset, out of the box, it's going to be very comfortable. I see someone asking, how much lighter than Quest 3? So Quest 3's front box, the actual visor without any straps and face padding, is just under 400 grams. Steam Frame's visor in the same conditions is 185 grams. I really cannot explain. This thing is less than half as heavy. The actual front core box here, the headset bit before you put all of the stuff for your human head on there, the actual this bit here um, is less than half the weight of Quest 3. Part of that is because it doesn't have a battery. Another part of it is that Valve has just made some really clever decisions. I remember picking this thing up and looking at it, and you can see that they have gotten rid of all of the internal empty space. John Carmack talked about this years ago. He said, I'm convinced that we could take, I think Quest 2 at the time or Oculus Go, whatever it was. He said, I'm convinced that we could take this headset and off by just not putting too much stupid empty space. And I think Valve has kind of taken that idea to heart. They have taken the big screen beyond design idea of shave every gram. Every gram matters. Make it the KPI or metric or whatever you want to do in a corporate environment. Make the goal of the product to shave every gram off, no matter how. As if you're on, an airplane that's falling down because it doesn't have enough thrust. You need to throw everything out the side, or a ship that's sinking. That kind of cartoon movie scenario, but for headset design. Big Screen did it for PC VR tethered headset. Valve has done it for a standalone headset, and again, this felt so nice on my head. It's so refreshing. I really hesitate to say too much because I've only spent a limited amount of time on it. Right, I don't have this in my home. This is all these photos are at Valve headquarters, but I having enough experience in this industry and knowing what it feels like to wear headsets, I have the intuition that this thing is going to be very, very, very comfortable to wear for hours.
I am loving the range of comments out there. People, can we go back to the image that showed the clear front faceplate? Because I think that one grabbed some viewers. Or not, the one with the compute unit shown face up next to the fully assembled unit is the
Yeah,
one I
bringing
wanted,
that up right
because I
now.
think that yeah, that one. All right, so this is over here on the right, for those people who aren't watching us, we have the compute unit that is the core module of the Steam Frame device. That's got your sensors on it, and what else, David?
It's got the sensors, it's got the chipset, the RAM, the storage, the displays, and the lenses. Theoretically, you could hold this thing up to your head and use it as a headset like this, fully functional, but you wouldn't, obviously.
But you need power coming into it,
Yes, of
right?
course. That's the one thing that isn't in this is power. By default, you get a battery strap that has a battery in the rear, but this is going to be a modular design, so people can come up with their own kind of battery systems here.
Well, imagine this thing being so light that's that light, and unfortunately, we were so we were overwhelmed, frankly, to be chatting directly with the engineers at Valve, while also needing to spend every moment we possibly could in headset. Right, this was a lot to take in a very short amount of time. And Valve had very specific talking points that they wanted to get across to us, while we're also peppering them with every possible question imaginable. But we're both taken aback by how small this thing is, and it fits into the rest of the headset with three little latches that you attach inside, because you don't expect to be unattaching this compute unit to the rest of the thing every day. Um, People are in the comments already imagining different head straps, different modules that can be for the back part of this whole thing. People are starting to talk about how the expansion port could be used in different ways, imagining the face sensors and mixed reality sensors. I think it's hard to see this whole picture all at once, and I think even over the course of the show, people are starting to get it. And one of the things is even this image just showing how small this darn thing is when it's on your face.
Yeah, I mean, it's so well engineered. That was my thought. I really was taken aback when I picked this thing up. And you have to realize this is everything a Quest 3 has except the battery, minus some color cameras. People get too caught up about that. The color cameras don't add much meaningful weight. Um, it really is incredible to see. Like, this is very, very, very smart industrial design and engineering. And as you mentioned, yeah, there's this expansion port. You can add color pass through after. We'll have to see what actually happens with accessory makers. There's always big promises about you can do XYZ. We'll have to see what happens. But I think this is a good foundation. Look, I totally get the people here that keep saying over and over again, 2K LCD, I don't want it, I don't want it. I look, I asked Valve over and over again, is there a Steam Frame Pro coming? They wouldn't say. In fact, I think at one point they even kind of threw it back to me and said, "Would you like to come build it?" And my
Want to work
response
on
was,
it? Yeah, I stared. It's my favorite exchange from this whole thing is David was relentless in putting the question to them, and I really appreciated it because he's in headset. I think at the time that you're being relentless about this questions and just they don't want to say right, they have nothing to announce, but he's like asking the question three different ways. What if I say Steam Frame Pro to you? What comes to mind? I'm just giggling there,
"Look,
watching
I
deal with this.
yeah, look, I specifically said to these Valve engineers working on this project, I said the first thing my audience is going to tell me to ask is, is there a micro OLED version coming? Is there a mini LED version? Are we going to get other display systems? Like, what can you do here for the people that don't want a regular LCD? I wish I could tell you they gave me a solid answer. Again, I find it very, very funny that at one point they just said, "Do you want to come work on it? Do you want to come build it?" And obviously, I just responded, "I'd like to report on it," and that was my
The best
response.
response I've listened to it. We were going through the transcripts. I've listened to it a dozen times because it's just a fantastic exchange. Because they're throwing it back at David's giving them a hard time. They're giving David a hard time. Just an absolute delight.
Yeah,
But yes, we all want OLED. We all want that. But look at the numbers of what has been shipping already, and understand that like you're mismatching your expectations, right? Like you wanted. Yeah,
I
I don't
guess we
know.
disagree on that. I totally understand it. I do understand it. This One of the other things I asked here, the context here, I said was, look, it's been 6 years since Index. It will be actually almost 7 years when this thing actually ships. They say early 2026. That's all they're saying. It will be almost 7 years. And I kind of was asking, are people going to be stuck with, to use a bad term, this headset for the next 7 years? Is it going to be LCD in 2030s, early 2030s? And I think what they did say, at least, and this is interesting, is that the architecture here is more evolvable. I don't know if that's a word, but I'm going to use it anyway. The architecture here is more solidified, right? They're not with the Index. They came out right after and said, "Look, we really ideally this should be wireless, and ideally there shouldn't be base stations, even though here's all the advantages of base stations." Like, fundamentally now they have the core, right? They have the inside out tracking and the controllers that they want, and they've got the standalone system here. I could imagine this being followed up by a Pro, right? They did a Steam Deck Pro. Again, Valve didn't confirm anything. We're not saying that they said it. I'm just saying, based on the understanding of the product, I could see a Steam Frame Pro arriving to.
Steam Frame OLED, right? Right. It would to follow
Yeah,
Valve's
sure,
approach, right?
sure, of course, yeah, Steam Frame OLED.
It's a first product in a way for them, standalone product, so it makes sense for them to test their market rather than try to have multiple SKUs. Yeah, there were 256 storage or 1 terabyte storage included are going to be our two options on storage, and then there's the micro SD card. And man, can I just like how excited I am by that micro SD card? I just need space to just like it's a like I so let me get into this by talking about what David and I need from Valve next, right? I want to talk about our hardware reviews that they're going to be asking
Sure.
us about at some point.
But why don't you just specifically tell the audience why you find the micro SD card slot so
Yeah,
exciting? And I think this image is a
that
clue.
does it. Yeah, that gives me the space to do it. So I appreciate it. Yeah. I've got a 2 terabyte SD card. I embarrassed myself on a previous podcast here by saying I bought a micro SD card and then I was unwilling to share the amount I paid for the storage. And now you know the storage. You can go look up the price of a 2 terabyte SD card. It's ridiculous. But I bought it essentially to stick into the bottom of a Steam Deck and to install the entirety of the Steam library that I own onto as much as I could of that 2 terabytes, right? With the idea being that if I reformat any PC in my home, if I reformat, let's say, a Steam frame or a Windows PC, I can tell my new installation of Steam over here actually go and get 150 gigabytes off of this micro SD card over here, put it on your high speed drive inside of this device over here, and I haven't had to wait 4 hours for 100 gigabytes to download from the server. I've just pulled it over. I also did that. I got that ridiculous SD card to do exactly what I wanted to do at Valve HQ, which I didn't do because they told us in the introductory. All right, so what I wanted to do was take the 2 terabyte card out of my Steam Deck that was in a bag with me, and then remove the face gasket here and stick it into the port that is on the back of the Steam frame, and to see what things from this library that there's only a portion of those things that play on this deck begin with, what subset of that go play inside here. But what I was laughing about is at the introduction of this whole day at Valve, they say, no screwdrivers. We don't want to see you taking things apart. And so, like, is it taking things apart to remove the face, remove the cushion off of there and stick my SD card in there? No. Do I have the time to log into Steam, my Steam account on there? I said, no. Okay, I won't take my 2 terabyte card out of my Steam Deck and stick it into the Steam frame today. But yes, you just gave me the illustration that David needs hardware to review for you, our audience. He needs a completed kit. The thing that they showed in that box, as you, a buyer, will go and experience at some point next year, according to Valve's timeline. He needs this sent to him for review. But we as UploadVR and me as this obsessed person who just wants to take my Steam Deck card from one device to another, right? I just want to, like, I've got a list of a couple dozen devs that I know out there, and they need testers to go and see, hey, does this run at 60 frames per second for you? Do you get this? Does it dip down to 30? Is it at 80 or 90 for you? I don't like our readers and you care about getting the end hardware here. But what we have that I wanted, like this early 2026 delivery date that Valve gave us, didn't give me a whole lot of confidence that that early 2026 is anything less than the last day of May 2026 before they have to come and say, no, actually, we're going to be delivering this at the end of 2026 or something. Like, that's all. Their timelines can shift, is what I'm trying to say. And we have a period here where a bunch of developers are going to start talking about their experience with this device. And we have this complicated story here where, like, I'm going to be talking to developers about their experience with this device, right? Like, no matter what Valve does, I'm going to hear from devs about what it's like to develop for this thing. And why not just, put it on my freaking head and let me mess around with it however I want? Because I don't care if the software experience is terrible, and I don't care if the hardware is unfinished. What I care is if I can take my SD card out of my Steam Deck and put it into my Steam frame, and I could care about the performance of those games. We went through this back in 2015 to 2016 with the Vive Pre, Valve and HTC shipped out a whole bunch of unfinished headsets to media. And we, media, hand in hand with devs, tested out a whole suite of ideas being attempted on that hardware. Room scale ideas, mixed reality filming, the first builds of fantastic contraption with OBS splitting out the views forward and background so that you could film at home and show people, oh, this is what it's like to make a weird contraption inside VR, right? Those things were done hand in hand between creators and devs back in 2015 to 2016, all excited about this stuff. Valve has a long story here ahead of us where they're going to try to do that same thing again, I think, but in a way that just people have forgotten about. They're just not ready for yet. This is a long story ahead for Valve to try to tell. And I'm trying to also say for our readers, like, software wise, hardware wise, I don't necessarily care about testing unfinished hardware and software. However, for you and for our readers, we also have to provide that perspective first and foremost. And I'm saying that to Valve, I'm saying that to our audience. We're going to have to accomplish both those tasks next year of, like, what is the software like here? What runs well? And also, what is the out of box experience for the buyers at home?
Yeah, this is definitely going to be a very difficult and involved one to review because it is kind of a dual mode product in a very rare way, in that, as we keep saying, yes, it can work standalone. You can theoretically use it without a PC, but it's meant to be used as a PC or with a PC via the wireless dongle in the box. So you have to talk about what it's like to use standalone, when you want to switch between. And I think for me, the biggest kind of skepticism I have about this for people who aren't very involved in the industry and don't understand the technology is just how Valve is going to make that very clear, right? With the Steam Deck, essentially the pitch here is the entire Steam library in your hands, okay? There are a few games that aren't going to run, good enough, but majority of the time you can run whatever you have on your Steam library on your Steam Deck. I'm talking about flat screen gaming, to be clear. With the Steam Frame, it's a lot less clear. It's you can run some of your Steam library on the headset itself, and some of it you need to reach out to your PC. When exactly you need to do that isn't super clear. Yes, there's going to be a Steam Frame verified program, but it's going to take a long time before all of Steam has had that badge either attached or not, right? And with Steam Deck, the verified program is a lot just about, like, does it work well with the controls? Are there some little Proton issues? With Steam Frame verified, it's going to be about the performance, right? We keep needing to underscore this. This thing is running a mobile chipset. Valve is not, as we've said for years now, Valve is not going to be breaking the laws of physics. You do not have the performance of a gaming PC in a headset that is 185 grams. It's never going to happen. It's just not. It's fundamentally impossible. So sometimes you're going to have to reach out to that PC. Speaking of PCs, I'd like to just talk a little bit about this hardware family, if there's nothing you want to add there on that. So
Go ahead. Yeah, just Geek Odin's comment. Steam Frame is your entire Steam library in your face. That is their pitch, even though David had all those caveats, and you know those caveats, Gee.
So that's the thing. It's in your face. That's where it ends up. But where does it come from? Does it come from the mobile chipset on here, or does it come from your gaming PC? That's the issue. With Steam Deck, it's in your hands, display and rendering all the time. You don't need to think, do I need to reach out to my gaming PC and stream? It's going to be.
There are instances where you can, though, right?
Of course you can. You can. Like, there's nothing stopping you.
Well, yeah. I mean, like, there's plenty. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
But I'm just saying, hypothetically, we talk about the portability thing, right? I take this on a plane. My PC isn't there anymore. Which games can and can't I play? Sure, you have the free and verified program, but again, it's going to be a lot. Like, my understanding is that, like, fundamentally this thing is actually, and we need to dig into this, a little bit less powerful than a Steam Deck. So, we're talking, like, it's really confusing here, and you're trying to run this not on an 800p screen, but you want to run this on, a virtual 1080p screen. So I think there's going to be a lot of people, there's going to be some people at least, who expect that they can buy this without a PC and start running Half-Life Alyx and Cyberpunk on a giant screen, and neither of those things is going to happen. And that's a big issue with the product. If we did live in a fantasy world where Valve could magically put a 5090 into something that fits in your hand, then sure, this would be an amazing product. That's what so much of the hype for this was, that it would magically play all your PC VR games without a PC. And I said for years on this show, that's not possible. And I hate that I'm right. I wish we lived in a world where that could happen, but we don't. We have to abide by the laws of physics. And I think it's going to be a little bit tough of a pitch. But part of that pitch that I think becomes a little bit more palatable for people who aren't interested in buying a gaming PC is this Steam machine. A decade ago, they failed because Steam machines were not a product from Valve. They were from a bunch of different companies that had to make a profit. They didn't have Proton, they didn't have this compatibility layer. Well, now we have a consoleized PC. Valve told us that it is more than 6 times more powerful than a Steam Deck, this Steam machine. It obviously does plug in to your socket. It uses hundreds of watts. It can go onto your TV. It can go on your desktop. It could be your PC. It could be your first PC if you're someone who hasn't got a gaming PC. But if you just want to get into high-end VR, it could just be your VR system. It could be your VR compute unit, right? It's plugged into the wall. Valve tells us that you can wake it with the Steam frame, right? So you can have your Steam machine plugged into the wall. And the idea here is that eventually, Valve says you'll be able to wake it without even having a display connected and without needing to do any login. They didn't make clear whether that will be available at launch. Maybe it'll be a little bit of a post-launch update. But let's say we get to that post-launch update. You can, as long as you have this thing plugged in somewhere and you have the little dongle plugged into one of these USB ports, you just grab your Steam frame, put it on, and in 1 or 2 clicks, you're in PC VR without even having to boot up your PC. We often talk about how, with Quest 3 and Steam Link, you can be in your Steam VR in a couple of clicks, but that still involves going into your PC, signing in, and, opening Steam, right? With this, because this is running Steam OS, this is all inherent, right? You literally would be able to just get home from work, run in, grab your Steam frame, and jump into PC VR. Or you wake up in the morning, depending on how dedicated you are, roll out of bed, grab the headset, and you're straight in. No need to go and boot this up. And again, this may require a post-launch update, but Valve says this is their goal. They confirmed it is their goal. You wouldn't even need to have this plugged into a monitor. You could literally just use it as your compute unit. We've talked about this idea for a long time, this idea that you would have this dedicated kind of rendering machine that's drawing power off your socket, but not compromising the headset from being wireless. Apple originally planned this for instead of Vision Pro, right? There's so many reports on this that I can say that with strong confidence, that Johnny Ive balked at the idea, but that this was the original plan from Apple, that actually, amazingly, this is according to some of the reports, amazingly, the M series chips that are now used in Macs today and have made the Mac kind of resurge as a really popular product category was apparently intentionally designed for this compute box that Apple was working on for the first idea of Vision Pro before it became a standalone headset. So this is kind of the revival of that. I'm really curious whether Valve will eventually sell a bundle of these two things, because there are a lot of people who kind of, I've heard them speak to me and say, I'm not a PC gamer. I don't want to spend time with config files, but I do want something that is higher fidelity than Quest can do. I don't want to be stuck with mobile graphics. And a lot of these people go to PlayStation VR 2, right? That's a huge appeal. I'm sure there are some people in our comments who say, I love my PSVR 2 because it gives me so much better graphics than Quest, and I don't have to faff around with a PC running Microsoft Windows with all of Microsoft Windows' hell of problems. Microsoft Windows is one of the craziest, most broken and just bloated, strange software on the planet. Well, SteamOS, optimal hardware and software, end-to-end control by Valve, they could make the optimal consoleized high-end PC experience. I'm really curious to see how these two things pair. Just before we move off hardware, I want to say one thing about the new Steam controller. It has IR LED on it for tracking, so you actually can track the Steam controller. So you can see that they've actually thought about Steam Frame when it came to designing the new Steam controller.
Oh, goodness. There's so many thoughts on this. There's so many people that are just... I have to balance the negativity that I'm seeing with in the comments from a bunch of people who haven't had the experience of using the headset and haven't been able to be able to say, I don't know, it just feels better in Steam Frame. right? Like you can say that about certain games or certain experiences that have been controlled or I'm losing this argument with our audience, but you know what bad input lag feels like. You know what low frame rate visuals feel like, but you don't know like the difference between 60 and 90 necessarily across specific verticals of content. And I have to keep coming back to this of just like you all are coming from this this specs universe where the specs on paper are all that matter. But in many cases, you're looking down like a spec sheet that you see on Amazon, and when you get it home into your house, you find that it doesn't actually do the thing it said on the specs sheet on Amazon. It was a fake spec. It was not an actual thing. And like how many families have had motion smoothing turned on their TV to fake the frame rate bumps and making everything look like a soap opera when it really shouldn't, right? The wrong way to do this sort of thing. And yeah, people are talking about the price, and then everyone is like having a lot of anxiety about the price. I think
Yeah.
that's part of the story that Valve is having trouble telling. Um, they they made really conscious choices. All of us as VR gamers look at and go, "Ooh, that hurts. It hurts you, and it hurts me." Right? Like I see your choice, and it hurts.
Yeah, I get at the end of the day, you have to balance price and features and performance, right? Valve said it's not that Valve isn't saying the price yet. They say they actually don't know. So that does indicate that, as you were saying earlier, I definitely don't think this thing has actually entered mass production yet. I think that report was false, to be clear. Um, I think they don't know. And there are a lot of macroeconomic uncertainties right now with tariffs and the way global supply chains are in chaos at the moment. So we don't, I think Valve literally doesn't know, but to be clear, in case anyone missed this earlier or has just joined us, they say they are aiming for it to be lower than the index, which was $1,000 for the full kit. We're speculating here, or I'm speculating at the very least, that $800 sounds right. Maybe it could be lower. That's just my guess. We don't know. We'll tell you as soon as we know. And Valve told us that they'll tell us as soon as they know. A couple of questions here I want to take. Firstly, there are multiple people asking, does it support DisplayPort? Can you use a cable if you want? No. This does not support DisplayPort in. Valve is going all in on wireless. They have put this wireless dongle in the box. It plugs into the front of your PC, the USB port. It's a USB-A dongle. It goes into your PC. The headset creates a dedicated 6 gigahertz connection to the dongle. And it has a separate radio. The headset has a separate radio for its regular internet connection, right? This thing is fundamentally architected for wireless. And I think a lot of people who maybe tried wireless VR a few years ago, when the software was a lot less refined on a bad Wi-Fi connection, with some bad encoder settings, maybe with an older GPU, don't realize just how far wireless has come, especially with the other technique that they use here, which is foveated encoding, where they're prioritizing the streaming resolution and encoding to where you're currently looking at. And this is on the system level, so it's got ultra low latency. Valve was able to toggle it off and on for me, and I found it worked incredibly well. Like, if you had blindfolded me and put a giant cable, look, if they had tricked me, if they brought me into a room and put a giant cable into the back of this thing and said, right, now you're running on wired, I would have thought yes. At no point did I say, I see compression. And I'm quite a compression snob. I'm actually someone who likes 4K Blu-rays, believe it or not, at times, for the best movies that I love. But I didn't see any compression here. There was no issue with that. The latency was very, very low. Again, down to the OS level and on the literal, hardware level for the Wi-Fi radios and everything, this thing is optimized for the lowest possible latency for wireless VR. And I think some people are like too dogmatic about this. Some people are like, no, I want my cable. I don't want wireless. I think that this will be the headset to convince the diehards that actually wireless is just better. Fundamentally, having a tether coming out of the back of your head in a VR headset sucks. Most people hate it. The enthusiasts that like it, I think maybe you're just in a little bit of a Stockholm situation because this is what you've been with for 15 years or 10 years or however long you've been in this industry. It's, join the future. It's amazing to be able to walk around freely, move around freely, have that feeling that you're not in a virtual world. And the other advantage, that you're not in the physical world, that you are in a virtual world. Because the other advantage is when you have a cable, you always know which direction your PC is in. You never truly get orientationally lost in the virtual world. Your brain always knows where base reality is directionally. With wireless, you don't. With wireless, you can get completely lost in the experience. And yeah, look, if it's something fast motion, we don't even need to say that comparison. It's so obvious that it's much better. Yeah, I think this will be the headset to convince the die-hard cable fans that actually VR is better without a cable.
Yeah, I'm loving the comments on that. We do need to add that there is a USB-C port on the battery at the back, but it's limited to USB 2 speeds, very, very slow. I also saw questions from people asking whether you can charge it up while in use. I didn't confirm that actually. Did you? Did you ask that question? That
Yeah,
it will continue charging?
yeah, I recall them saying yes. So I see some people saying, I don't care about the tether, but I do care about a battery running out. I want to play for 6 hours. Okay, cool. Put a battery in your pocket and wire it up to the back of the headset. As Ian says, there's a USB port there. Problem solved. Like wireless gives you the option. You can, if you want, even put a USB-C port here and put it into the socket. You can pretend you're playing wired if you want. You can put it all the way to your socket and play indefinitely. Nobody's going to stop you. This gives you the kind of freedom to not to. See someone else saying, I don't want wireless adapter pulsing radiation to my brain. I can feel it. I promise you can't. There's been so many studies done on this. You can trick someone into thinking that they're being hit by EM when they're not. It's non-ionizing radiation. If this was a problem, the entire global population is fucked, because think of the amount of people that are using AirPods all day. It's not a problem. Wi-Fi is non-ionizing radiation. It's not going to harm you, I promise.
So, the strap is removable. This front, let's be clear here, this front compute unit, I wish we had taken a photo of this. You could take this off, and then it's like that, it should be like that meme of where you put a person in reality. They look like you're joking that this is, you just put them in a like a cardboard box that actually lets them see the world on the other side, and then you joke that they're actually in virtual reality. I think that's what it would look like if we removed this unit. And I want to talk what Apple could do with that kind of modular design at some point. Looks like we had another Parmesan donation.
Yeah,
Let's not downplay the idea that you can run x86 on an ARM processor, and they created something called foveated streaming. These are major contributions to the space. Go read my article. It will be linked down in the comments, where I'm quoting Valve at length on multiple subjects. There's a lot more to share from the things they said. But one of the comments was what Valve does with the work that they do, and a lot of the work that Parmesan is bringing up there, represents the output of hundreds of people over more than a decade. There's souls across this earth who are just filing pull requests and choosing to accept those changes in service of these types of ideas that Parmesan is bringing up. And it's a beautiful thing that is out there, and it isn't platform centric when you really get down to the core of it.
Yeah, I think when you look at Proton, which to be clear is this compatibility layer that is built into SteamOS and is used on Steam Deck to be able to run Windows applications on Linux, and then you add FEX, this compatibility layer or emulator, if you want to be technical about it, for x86 to ARM. That is an amazing software experience. This is the result of a decade of investment in software translation from Valve. This is a device that can run, everything you want pretty much. But I want to keep kind of repeating that run. It doesn't mean that this has the performance to run everything, but it does mean that it can open and you can run it. And maybe it runs at 5 frames per second, but it does run. And that opens up so much freedom. Let's talk about the software a little bit here. This is a PC. I'm going to bring up a different image. We've shown this one too much. This is a PC. You can do whatever you want with it. Valve doesn't tell you what you can do. You can run. You could actually swap out the OS for a different one if there was an OS suitable, right? You can download whatever you want. You can change whatever files you want. You can have all the access to the sensors and hardware and all of that you want. This is a PC. It is like you can have a floating Linux desktop without ever having a PC. You on a plane, in a hotel. If you're someone who loves software freedom and you love the ability to have all of the open source software and you love your Linux desktop, this is that in a headset, right? And that is actually, it is remarkable to say that we've talked about often this massive gap between mobile and desktop operating systems, where one of the big flaws of Apple Vision Pro is that Vision OS is based on iPad OS, not Mac OS. So you have the same level of freedom that you would have on an iPad Pro. And this debate that's been going on in the tech industry for 10 years now is, what is a computer? Is an iPad Pro a real computer? And the reality is, folks, that the answer is no, it's not, because you don't have true access to the file system. You can't do whatever you want. Applications are sandboxed. They don't get the ability to run whatever kind of computational tasks they want. Background tasks are heavily throttled. You're deeply restricted in what you can do. So, so much of Apple Vision Pro is about Mac Virtual Display, right? It's that you carry around your Mac with you and get it as a giant virtual display, but fundamentally not because you're actually doing computational tasks that are too heavy for the chip, especially not the M5 in the new Vision Pro. You're carrying around the Mac because it has the operating system that gives you the freedom to do whatever the hell you want, right? So often I'm thinking, I'm not using this Mac for its performance. In fact, the MacBook I currently use is an M2 MacBook, which is less powerful than the M5 Vision Pro. So it's not a compute situation there. It's software freedom. So this is the other end of the spectrum, right? This is a free headset in the sense of the software being free. You actually can do full desktop tasks here. There is no piece of software that Valve tells you you can't use that. How dare you try to do this with the device that you just paid us money to buy? They will let you do whatever you want with it. If you own a Steam Deck, it's the same situation as that.
There's so many things to discuss here. Leave this image up if you would for a minute, because in the reflection you can see me taking the picture that I'm taking of you. I've got my little name badge on here. We both had name badges that they made us wear, and I loved one of the questions out there. What was our time like testing Half-Life 3 at Valve headquarters? And no, we did not test Half-Life 3, and that was part of our questions when we tried to ask about content. Was just when we'd have nothing to announce content wise. But I do have to address this elephant in the room, which is what the dudes looked like standing there at the end of the hallway. They looked like an elephant in the room, standing there at the end of the hallway in front of a black curtain. And I imagine that there were interesting things being developed behind that black curtain. But at one point during this day, I needed to go to the restroom, and I'm going down the hallway, told where it is. I go right over to it. But right as I'm going down the hallway, there's this, guy, a very beefy dude standing there in a suit, very stern-like. And I'm like, oh, that's security. They don't want me running over to that part. They don't want me to see what's happening behind the black curtain. So I wanted to just mention this small, anecdote from our day, that we had access to 2 or 3 rooms, and we got to see, this is one of the rooms you're seeing depicted, one of our only depictions of David and I both in this room simultaneously. And you can see the couch. One of the couches here. I laid down on that couch wearing this headset, and it was the delight to wear.
Yeah, so as Ian was just saying, we had thought that, maybe behind these scary security guards in their doors was someone building Half-Life Alyx 2 or Half-Life 3. And that does bring us to one of the news stories we want to talk about here, which is that Valve confirmed to Road2VR that they are not currently working on a new VR game. So we asked about content. Valve repeatedly said, we're not talking about content today. We're not talking about content today. According to Ben Lang from UploadVR, one person that he asked gave him a definitive no that Valve is working on a new VR game currently at this point. And I think that is shocking to me. That is unbelievable that 5 years after Half-Life Alyx, it's not even we don't have anything to announce. It's not that, we're working on something and we'll let you know. It's that according to this person who, said this to Ben, They are not. There's not a team at Valve currently working on an Alex 2 or a new VR game.
And yet, we know it will run Half-Life 3 just fine.
Sure, but like that's if
Like that they didn't say that. We just know it, right?
sure, but you're just to be clear, you're assuming Half-Life 3 is a flat game.
Sure, but I mean, that doesn't mean it's not going to contain pieces that devs use to muck around in the same way that they use the Half-Life Alyx files, right? To muck around and make their own stuff. Like that stuff, whatever they make in Half-Life 3 will get released back into Steam Workshop and become the pieces of VR experiences that people will use. So even if it doesn't play, it goes back. What does it mean to have a game play in VR? Is there any advantage whatsoever? And everyone is waking up here today. Like I got to talk about my experience with Apple Vision Pro and how I've used it in myriads of ways, in just so many times that no other VR headset would ever go. And the reason for that is an assortment of things, right? Number one, it's standalone first. Number two, I get a whole library of content from a different device, the iPad, that runs with me wherever I go. Now you've got that out of a Steam frame, right? There's going to be some library of content that's going to play on your face. And I got to talk about pass-through. I don't think the grayscale pass-through, y'all didn't complain about it too much with Quest 2. Now you're complaining about it?
Well, because Quest 2 was not pitched as a device that you use to watch, to play games on a giant screen. Nobody really talked about that as a major use case for Quest 2. And it became a massive thing. People often did say, oh, what I would want out of a hypothetical Quest 3 would be color pass-through. We talked about that for years. But just kind of coming back to what we're talking about here on the Valve Games thing, it's all well and good that Half-Life 3 is going to probably exist. We don't know, but probably. I am sure that, as some of our commenters are saying, someone will port it to VR. But all that said, it's a massive disappointment that a company that is the owner of Steam, that is selling you a headset that runs Steam OS, that doesn't, have the Meta Horizon store or the PlayStation store or or the Pico store, the company that is selling you this hardware for potentially $800, that's our guess. Valve has only confirmed sub $1,000 essentially as their goal. It's astonishing that a company like that is a games company, is not making a game. And it says a lot about what's changed in Valve in 10 years, because when the Index launched, Gabe Newell came out and said that he saw Valve as like Nintendo, that we build our hardware alongside games, and the games and the hardware, there's no line between these things. We're basically Nintendo. And he talked about this, saying this was just before Index. We're working on 3 VR games, right? And then these 3 VR games turned into 1 VR game, Half-Life Alyx. And then there hasn't been anything that happened since. And this is a company that has some of the most amazing IPs out there. Portal, you could you could imagine an amazing Portal VR game built by Valve that wouldn't work on flat screen, something that's fundamentally VR that you just couldn't even conceive of running in flat screen. You could think of, a Team Fortress 2 game, a Counter-Strike game, a Dota. There's so much IP here. They've done Half-Life. They don't have to do that again. But I think that obviously would also make the sting of whatever price point this is, which again, if it is $800, that's our guess. My guess, for a lot of people, that's a huge amount of money. It's a huge amount of money. It'd be a lot different if you get this for free, right? You get you get Portal VR. Valve has just come up with this totally new game where you're using portals in room scale VR. But we're not in that world. We're in a world where you're saying you're going to play the same games that you would play on any other headset. There's nothing unique here. There's nothing new. You can play Half-Life Alyx again, or maybe you haven't played Half-Life Alyx in the first place, but after you get finished Half-Life Alyx, there's nothing else from Valve that you just go on Steam and we'll take 30% of whatever they sell you.
It's there's a lot to consider, right? I played Portal 2 at a very high frame rate inside the headset, and it felt amazing to see that game scream at high frame rate with these 2 lightweight controllers in each hand, and I'm just throwing myself across levels, and it's looking and feeling fantastic.
But you're not throwing yourself across levels. You're
Yeah.
throwing the character on the flat screen in front of you across levels. And it's fundamentally different. And again, we're Upload VR. At the end of the day, we both do believe that there is something fundamentally different about VR gaming than flat screen.
So back to the pass-through and back to the monochrome. One of the demos that Valve did is they reskinned the pass-through to be a different color for the game that I had up, so it like turned blue or something during one of the games. But for me, David, this is it feels like a non-issue because I turn pass-through off so much of the time. That's why I'm sort of harping on this. Like it's
But there
just
are times you use it. You're
one
on
of
a
the things
plane.
Valve has pointed out is its night vision. They have the IR illuminators and the grayscale. You will see in the dark, you will have night vision, you will have augmented vision, you will have better than human vision
No,
when the lights are off.
from a lightness perspective, but the resolution, it's like being legally blind. I'm sure you had the same experience. It's very, very low resolution. There's no
Just
detail there.
that it's legally blind, but I won't bump into anything.
I don't know. Honestly, it depends on. I wouldn't bump into large objects, but I could see myself easily knocking objects with my arms. We're talking about the use case on a plane. Do you use pass through when you're using a
No,
Vision Pro on a
but David,
plane?
the comparison there was between the lights being off and not having zero vision, and having some vision because the grayscale and the illuminators are coming together to give you
Sure.
rudimentary night vision.
You could imagine. I mean, look, Apple could ship that in a software update tomorrow. So could Samsung. Meta could do it for the Quest 3S, but not the 3. It doesn't have illuminators. It's an interesting point. I do take your point that you do. The advantage of the grayscale pass through is that you get night vision. Okay, sure. I just do think, like, if you look at a lot of the reviews for Quest 3 and a lot of the usage statistics that we're hearing from Meta, like, people love the ability to have their virtual screens in their real environment. It's great to be able to actually see your surroundings, even when you're doing things like downloading updates, right? You're in the headset, you're waiting for an update to download, you still have this full awareness. I think, I'll put it this way. I think that when someone does come out with a color pass-through accessory here, it's going to be really, really popular and have a very, very high attach rate.
That's a great point. Yeah, I mean, let's appreciate all of these things, right? Like, yes, the pass through on Quest 3 is good. Yes, the pass through on Vision Pro is good. Yes, there's long ways to go from those improving. Yes, those are both step forwards from what Quest 2 was. Yes, this is a step backwards from where Quest 3 is in pass through. But what I'm saying, like, we all don't know the price. Valve doesn't even know the price. So none of us can judge whether this package makes sense and whether you're going to spend 4 hours with pass-through off enjoying your Steam frame game on a 70-inch monitor at 90 frames per second for the entire 4-hour period, and whether that play session I just described would have ever happened, number one, in any other scenario, right? Like, number one, like, this is what's, I can't get this across to people. I'm watching movies on my ceiling that I would have never watched in any other way, right? You're going to play games in this system that you never would have played in any other way. So I understand why everyone's doing this. Oh, is it worth the money? But you're not. You cannot yet conceive of the times we're going to play this game.
So I strongly agree that without knowing the price, it's hard to judge the package here. Again, I want to say this because I keep seeing commenters over and over asking, what is the price? And I'm just going to keep repeating it. I'm sorry if you've been watching the whole stream, but it's clear that people aren't hearing this. Valve has said that their aim is for it to be cheaper than the Index full kit. The Index full kit was $1,000. Therefore, assuming nothing goes crazy wrong, we expect this to be less than $1,000. Yet they did describe it as, a kind of premium experience. So I think it's going to be in the higher end of the hundreds of dollars. I don't think it's going to be 500, right? It's fundamentally, it's got a more powerful chip than Quest 3. It's got more RAM than Quest 3. The controllers have more IR LEDs, and they've got like fancy, we haven't even talked about the controllers have TMR thumbsticks, right? So the thumbstick should be really, really precise and essentially never drift. Never is a strong word, but essentially, they've got extra capacitive sensors. These are Touch Plus on steroids. Okay, these are better objectively from like a technology perspective, better controllers. The headset, having the battery as separate from the main unit is a slightly extra cost. But yeah, I don't know. It'll be really interesting to see, because you're right that like if this thing comes down in the very lower end of the expectations at $600, the black and white pass-through isn't that much of a deal. But as you the more hundreds of dollars you add, it is a big deal. And I want to put this in the context of kind of competition, right? And coming competition. Valve said that this thing is going to launch in early 2026. Now, from our sources and from other sources, we expect that in late 2026, Meta is going to launch a headset that has potentially something like 2.5K micro OLED panels, high quality color pass through, is lighter than this in the front. All of these things has an external compute, so it keeps even more of the kind of weight off the front. And that will be very optimized for virtual screens, and it will run Steam Link because it will run anything that the Quest runs with Horizon OS. And yeah, you won't get the dedicated point-to-point connection, but if you're actually talking about the specific use case of virtual screens, arguably Meta, if the rumors are right, and it's easy to talk about a product that doesn't exist yet, but if the rumors are correct, they could actually make the product that is better for playing games on a virtual screen at quite a similar price, at around $1,000 is the rumor for the Meta headset, according to the Wall Street Journal. So I don't know. I come back to what I'm saying. To me, this is a great VR headset. Like, this is, if I just want to jump into a PC VR game, right? I have my PC over there, or my Steam machine, and I want to play the PC version of VR Chat, or I want to play a simulator, or I want to play Skydance Behemoth, or Half-Life Alyx, or whatever it happens to be, whatever your personal PC VR game of choice is. This is an incredible headset for it. It's comfortable. It's got this dedicated wireless connection. The lenses are sharp, and I don't know. Like, to me, that's what this is. And once you start saying, sorry to keep harping on about it, but once you start talking about using a 2K LCD panel and black and white pass through for virtual screens, I struggle to understand, Janet. But I think we're going to have to agree to disagree on that one, and that kind of our different perspectives there for sure.
Well, there's a lot of nuance to, but I think everything we're saying here. I see Nick mentioning the idea of Meta and Microsoft working out a better Windows connection for Puffin and getting to maybe 2.5K with that Windows connection. And they're sort of calling that out as what they need for it to become their work headset. And I need space to talk about working in VR and how hard it is. You have to have every service that you need to do your job available to you in headset. And without one key service in your day, you can't do your job. Or with two added steps to use that service in your day, you're adding hours of work that you're billing yourself for if you're a self-employed person, rather than just doing it in a simpler way. I've encountered these barriers in various ways, right? Like go read my Galaxy XR stories where I'm spending 4 days in messing with Galaxy XR in every way, shape, and form. And I'm doing more work more quickly in that headset because the headset integrates more directly with Google services than Apple's headset does, because a bunch of the apps that Google serves to iPad users, they've chosen not to make available for Vision Pro users directly on the headset. I have to go use a browser for some of those things. We're in, like, you realize that Valve made a statement to us here. There was some comment somewhere in our comments, somewhere in our quotes, where they actually think the barrier between the two types of games you want to play, VR games over here, flat games over here, is actually one of the biggest friction points from keeping you in headsets like this for longer. So again, to go to the Apple Vision Pro experience, right? I've watched probably half a dozen or a dozen 3D movies in the course of a year and a half. I have watched a total of one and a half 3D movies in theaters over the course of 25 years previously. So in the course of 18 months or 2 years of owning an Apple Vision Pro, the quality of everything that they've done has put me in like a 10x factor of content that I never would have enjoyed before. And you think, David, about things like us discarding like 180-degree video as a content type. We discarded, or lots of people discarded, just like, oh, it's not interactive. I'm not interested. Like, we discarded it because we thought that the interactivity was the thing that made 180-degree video not great. And we realized all these years later, no, it was actually the quality of the video, the resolution of the video, its frame rate, and the scale of all the content in the scene. You nail all of that, and suddenly non-interactive immersive video is amazing to experience, right? We're going to do like, Valve is making the argument that, like, you've never experienced your entire gaming library all together on one device. And it's going to take a while for us as Valve and you as our user to make this a good experience. But we see, like, that they made the argument that year by year of them working on this behind the scenes, they've been slowly chipping away at it. And the reason they're choosing to talk about it now is they think they've gotten enough of that threshold of content that you'll go in and find enough surprises that, oh, this does work. Oh, and this actually runs really nice in standalone mode in my headset. Oh, and now I'm using VR at a cafe because the headset is so darn light. It fits in my bag. I pulled it out and played my Steam games there, sitting in a cafe for 2 hours. And, like, 6 months ago, you didn't think that was possible. You didn't think VR headsets went there because there were all these barriers that were not real. Anyways, I'm telling you what Valve is saying. They think one of the barriers there is the division between our games. That's one of the reasons they made the choices they did.
Yeah, look, from a software perspective, I think it's definitely interesting that you're getting, your flat and VR library here to some extent. I think we're going to go round on circles a little bit about whether this is the headset you would bring to a cafe. And, I don't know, I would want color pass through if I'm in public outside in the real world. If
You're grabbing software. I hate
Sorry?
that, but you're right. We are going to go in circles. It's just,
it becomes a lot more. And we talk so often about this on this podcast about how for Apple 4K micro OLED was this essential minimum point for all these use cases. And I think one thing that's interesting is that Valve kind of almost gave a expression when we talked about things like virtual work and productivity. This is a gaming headset. Valve is a gaming company. This is for playing games. You can do more than that, of course, but that's not what this was built for. It's not what it was designed for. For the productivity use case, I see some fierce debate going on in our comments about, are headsets good enough for this? For me, it needs to have comfort and resolution. It needs to have 4K per eye at minimum, and it needs to be really light and comfortable. And we actually haven't seen a headset arrive that puts these two things into one yet. We've seen Apple Vision Pro come along with a 4K micro OLED and Samsung Galaxy XR and Play for Dream and some things like that. We've also seen some really comfortable headsets, Big Screen Beyond, and this. It's damn comfortable. It's comfortable enough that from my initial experience, I would want to wear it for that long. I'd have to actually try it and find out. But I think so far, based on my experience in this industry, this is comfortable enough. It is at the comfort level for me where I'd want to, but it's not at the resolution. And we're going to go around in circles on this a little bit. I don't want to do anything you just said in a 2K LCD.
I've earlier this week I played Walkabout Mini Golf in Steam on the Apple Vision Pro using ALVR and a wired internet connection almost directly. I went through the router, but it was going over the highest speed Ethernets I could manage over my network, and it felt really, really nice. Like, it wasn't perfect yet, but it was probably as good as like a PCVR experience was on Quest in 2019 or 2020. And that's using completely open source software. And am I going, like, it's so hard to hear you say that when at the same time that like I live inside of Apple Vision Pro these days. Like I hate that I'm not inside of it right now, but
Okay.
there's plenty of instances where I do want to wear this that the Apple Vision Pro is going to be too heavy for.
But the Apple Vision Pro has 4K micro OLED displays, right? It's you keep saying, I do all these things in Vision Pro, and you're right. I don't disagree with you, but this isn't Vision Pro. It's got nowhere near the contrast. It's got, you know, 90% worse contrast. It's got half the, number of pixels or something like that. I need to do the calculation at some point. I'm just throwing out numbers here. It's a lot lower resolution and it's a lot lower contrast. It's not the Apple Vision Pro. It's a 4K, it's a 2K LCD, and I need to keep kind of harping on that. It's like I feel like you keep describing this as if it was a 4K micro OLED or even 3K, but it's not. It's the same resolution as Quest 3.
But remember the line again. The line that I have in my article. You'll read it down in the description. Points out that 50% of Steam users have a 1080p display.
Sure, but what I'm trying to tell you is when you put a 2K LCD in a headset is much lower resolution than a 1080p display when you come to angular resolution and things like that. Like you can, if you absolutely max it out across your entire field of view, you can just about get, a 1080p monitor in there virtually. But when you come into some of the issues with sampling and how that works, it's lower resolution. So yeah, you can make a gigantic monitor that covers your perfect field of view and get roughly 1080p or so. But when it comes down to the true angular resolution, the Apple Vision Pro is actually kind of matching just beyond that kind of 1080p. So, like, I get you, and you're totally right. But when it comes to things like console gaming, people are doing this on 4K TVs, for example. That's what people are used to. You can get something that nobody has really acknowledged, and people have talked about how the present is either better or worse than the past. One thing that is just unbelievable to someone a few decades ago is televisions these days. And we have to acknowledge the competition here is televisions. You can walk into Walmart is the equivalent, I guess, in America. And I've looked at it myself. You can buy an amazing, unbelievably giant, high quality TV for a couple of $100, for like $200. There's a very famous chart online where it shows the cost of everything as it changes over time. And you see things, like university tuition is going, when housing is going, when energy is kind of going up a little bit. And then right at the bottom, with the biggest decrease of all time, is TVs. It literally is the bottom of this graph where you can see it crashing down. The idea, it used to be a signifier of wealth that you had a giant TV a couple of decades ago. It was this idea of a massive giant TV. Some people in the UK, because we're so kind of Victorian about these things, still talk about the idea of a flat screen TV as being wealth. It's not. You can get astonishingly big, astonishingly high quality TVs for almost no money, and we have to acknowledge that is the competition here.
I get it. It's just I don't know if I'm gonna lose it on this analogy, but it's basically an 800p screen inside of the Steam Deck. Is that right? It's right below 1080. It's
in the Steam Deck. Yeah, it's like 1200 by 800 or something. It's significantly below 1080. It's half the pixels of 1080, but
yeah,
it's in your hand and in a small screen.
And then, of course, you can hook it up and do all sorts of other things when you use the external display using HDMI out through a port. And you can't do any of that in the Steam frame. It's a completely different experience where this thing is all on its own. I get what you're saying. What I'm struggling with is trying to make sure we're thinking of the people who aren't currently in our audience right now. I'm seeing a lot of people who are like, I've already got a Quest 3. I don't need this. And I get that, right? That's a valid viewpoint. I'm seeing people who are like, I've got a 4K OLED TV that's 75 inches. I cannot go back to this. I get that. That's valid. But those views are not representative of people who have never had a Steam machine before, or have never had a Linux-based PC, who have never owned a PC of any kind. They've had Chromebooks.
Look, I think when it comes to VR, the appeal, I keep coming back to this. It's amazing because what they haven't had is VR. The real market of this thing, let's just talk about who is this for. It's for people who have not, it's for PC gamers who play games on their gaming PC, but who have not jumped into PC VR yet. Either because they didn't want the Index because it was wired and had all these base stations. They didn't get a Quest, maybe because, a lot of people literally don't know that you can use a Quest for PC VR, by the way. It's actually a lot of PC gamers just don't know that that's a thing. They think that the Index is the only way to do it, and the Rift was back in the day. So these are the kind of people it's for. It's also for people who maybe just said, I don't want a meta product. I don't want, to make a meta account or whatever. People who have, this is for people who said, I like the idea of the Index, but I want it to be wireless. And you cannot underestimate how many people that is. When we do go out of our bubble, most people think that the idea of a VR headset with a tether is absurd, especially in the world of Quest. It's thought of as archaic and backwards, and nobody wants to spend, outside of our bubble, wants to spend $1,000 for a headset with a tether. This is Valve Index, but wireless. That's the fundamental product pitch here to a lot of people, I think. And people maybe look and say, I want to maybe do some VR gaming with my PC. I want to try that out. Maybe you're a simulator guy or or person, or you use racing sims or flight sims, and you think, I want to get into this, but I don't want to buy a 6-year-old Index with all of the kind of base stations and all this. It's a Index that's wireless and doesn't need base stations and has twice the pixels. That's the pitch here. I could be wrong. You could be right. I just think that the flat screen pitch here, I don't see it working. I don't see it working at this resolution. I don't see people saying, I want to play flat screen games on this.
So, Towerfall is one of my favorite games. It's one of my favorite family games that I've ever played. I think I've played it some on both Steam and some on Nintendo Switch. Nintendo Switch, I think, is where it has, I can't remember where it has 6-player support. You've ever played Towerfall? It's a fun little crazy, almost, I don't even know how to describe it. I don't want to call it as a Smash Brothers-esque game, but you just shoot little arrows at your other character on the screen and jump around. A delightfully twitchy, fun game to have with family in the same room together. There's a scenario where my family is in different locations physically, and one person is two people have Steam Decks, 2 people have Steam frames, and the 4 of us share a single screen, just as if we were sitting on the couch together, playing it on Nintendo Switch. But we're in 4 physical different locations, yet we're seeing the same couch co-op game. What I'm so struggling to get across in this entire conversation is what Valve has shown with Steam Frame, with this new Steam controller, with the link between the Steam Frame and your PC, is them trying to eke out every millisecond of latency that would stop those 4 people in 4 different physical locations from having the same experience that if they were physical. Like, you won't feel the same as if you were physically co-located with everyone, because of all that latency taking your button presses and translating them into the game. But with Valve controlling all of these passes of input presses and frame rates, it's conceivable that that experience that I'm discussing, 4-player couch co-op of a flat game, could feel best in Steam frames and Steam Decks because of the steps Valve is taking today. And I need to win some acknowledgement from our audience that, like, you put up with a lot of latency in your gaming that you never acknowledge. You don't complain about, and it isn't figuring into your thoughts on price right now.
Look, we're going to have to keep going around in loops here, but some of them do. Some of them have 4K OLED TVs that have lower latency than this. OLED has lower latency than LCD. That's the other thing about LCD. You're talking about latency. LCD has higher refresh latency than OLED. As the commenters are pointing out, you can get a 144 hertz gaming monitor for $150 these days. We are in the year almost.
If this headset was 4K and Steam Machine couldn't power it, people would be pissed. Like that's why I was bringing up the 800 thing. Like it feels like there's some very obvious choices that Valve's trying to make these things work together once we get further down the line.
Sure, but you could imagine, in a parallel universe where this has 4K micro OLED displays, that they're just used for flat screen gaming and like you're heavily undersampling for VR. Also, look, the reason that this doesn't have 4K micro OLED displays, there's two reasons. One, because it would be double the price. There's no free lunch here, folks. It would be $2,000 instead of sub 1,000, right? That's the reality. Galaxy XR is what you get, $2,000. And look, the other reason is that I think this thing's been in development for a long, long time. We need to actually acknowledge that the specs of this actually leaked months and months ago, and we reported on them. And we actually said at the time, this is probably just an early model. This has been in development for years. Even I think it was mentioned that it was years old. But you can actually find an article on UploadVR which is citing the kind of, I think the Discord group of Brad Lynch, where they had found these proof of concepts for Deckard that showed a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 chip and 2K LCD panels. So this thing, this thing has been in development for years and years and years, and there is a Valve time effect here. It does take them quite a while to get these things out the door. In theory, probably are parallel universes where this thing came out a year or two ago. There's nothing in this that is newer than a few years, right? The chipset is from like 2023, early 2024, depending on how you want to measure it. The displays, there were 2160 panels like this in HV Reverb G2, like a long time ago, 5-6 years ago. So I think some of that is kind of an issue here. But I want to say I really like. There's so much negativity going on here, but I want to be clear. I'm only saying that about flat screen gaming. I loved this as a PC VR headset. I think this is an incredible PC VR headset. I would want to play my PC VR games with this rather than anything else. I'm genuinely saying that. I own all of these headsets. This is the headset I want to use to play PC VR games.
It's like you got a VR headset and then they attach a trailer hitch and it says, here's your Steam Deck and you can enjoy your PC games on the Steam Deck. But, you should just be happy with the Steam Deck quality. Like I get that everyone is kind of torn about it. And I'm looking at the commenters here. Let's try to move through some of the specific comments and questions that we have from people. So yeah, we don't want to keep looping on this display thing, but it's going to keep coming up over the next several months as people sort of tear themselves up about it. It's like one person in our comment saying it would have been an instant buy for them right this minute if it had been 2K from Valve and an OLED, right? And they're like, that I assume that same person probably didn't go and insta buy the Galaxy XR because of reservations over the Google Daydream debacle of last decade. So like it's people wanted Valve's attention on the hardware that we saw 2 weeks ago. Like you can't have everything.
A lot of people have been waiting for Valve to make their purchasing decision. A lot of people in our audience, at least. So I think a lot of people now are going to make a decision. They're going to say either I'm getting this, or they're going to pull the trigger on Quest 3, or they're going to pull the trigger on Galaxy XR now that they know what is coming from Bellevue. It's so interesting to see people kind of tune in here, and just come out of nowhere and join the stream. Hello to everyone that's just joining us. A comment saying, just tune in, so is it standalone? That's a very complicated question that we've been going over for a lot of the stream. Yes, it has standalone capabilities. In theory, you can run anything on it. In practice, it's a mobile chipset, so you can't actually start running high-fidelity PC VR titles. They will run, but at a very low frame rate, so you will not want to. But in the box of this, and I'm going to say it again, I really apologize to people who have been listening the whole stream, but here's the box. You have two controllers, the headset, and the wireless dongle. The wireless dongle connects to your PC. The headset creates a dedicated Wi-Fi connection to the PC with a separate radio for the rest of its internet connectivity. It is look, our article headline used Valve's most important quote here that they said over and over again. SteamFrame is a streaming first standalone headset. It is a PC streaming first standalone headset. That one sentence describes the whole product. It has standalone capabilities. It is a standalone computer. You can use it without a PC. It's designed to be used with a PC.
Um, a lot of people recapping some of the things we covered earlier in the show, but a leak of does Steam Frame mean that Geek Odin is out of business? No, Geek Odin is in the queue for a Steam Frame dev kit, and we will see what magic might come out of VR desktop, right? Virtual desktop once they get it in their hands and really start exploring what's
So,
possible.
look, one thing I'll say about Virtual Desktop is I think you had the same experience. It's the best piece of software on Galaxy XR. If you're a gamer, if you are looking to play games on Galaxy XR, Samsung Galaxy XR, the Virtual Desktop is the best software. Marcellus Wilson asking, so can Steam Frame not be used with a wire? No, it can't. It does not support display in. Valve is going all in on wireless. It's so good that you won't want a wire. Valve has solved wireless VR. I can say that from my time. Maybe that's hubristic. Maybe I shouldn't be saying that, but I'm just going to say it. They've solved wireless VR. The dongle plus the foveated streaming plus end-to-end control over the network stack on both sides and the OS level on the headset. It turns out if that's your focus, look, Meta's focus is on standalone. Um, and you know what? The reason that Link exists is not so that you can play your PC VR games, Quest Link. It exists so that developers can easily test their games that they're building for Quest on a PC without having to compile each time. Meta has explicitly said that in internal conversations at times. I can report. They have literally admitted, look, this thing's not really for gaming. So Meta's focus is not on Link. It's the last thing they think about. It's their lowest priority thing. Valve's highest priority thing is Steam Link. It's making this a good experience. So when your entire engineering talent is focused on this as the primary thing, you can actually make an amazing wireless experience, and that's what Valve has done here. So I said this in my hands-on. I'm going to say it over and over again. I think that this is the headset that will make the I need a tether and I will never accept wireless people rethink their views. I don't think anyone other than Valve could do it because everyone else, there's always going to be this skepticism. But I think people trust Valve to know when the time is right for wireless. And folks, in this day and age with 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi 6E and foveated streaming and the amazing encoders that Qualcomm puts or decoders that Qualcomm puts in these chipsets these days, it's time for wireless.
Yeah, so VR Shock, it's so fascinating. So no MR, AR, XR capabilities, no OLED, no lighthouse tracking, no tether port. We discover there is the expansion port. We covered that. But also like I'm so excited to have like Big Screen Beyond is amazing as a hardware idea because what it does is it focuses on one thing, right? Let's be like a cinema with as light of a frame as you can possibly do, and they went and built that. Right, it's 100 and something grams. It's so darn light, and Valve is making very specific decisions here to focus on something else. And David, like what you just described, you think about the decisions being made at Microsoft to try to make you spend more money on your monthly subscription to Xbox Live. So all decisions at Microsoft around gaming flow from how do we get people to get more value out of their Xbox Live subscription? How do we get people to pay more for that subscription? And how do we get more of them to do it? Here's Valve saying, no, actually, what we're going to do is we're going to put 3 or 4 different objects in your home. All of them are laser focused on being wireless and it being a good experience for you. That feels to me like a better trade-off. Like I want to invest in that as a user rather than Microsoft's bet, which is you've always got to be near a robust connection to the internet in order to access Xbox Live.
I think your microphone's gone a bit strange at the end there, and maybe it's just for me. Folks, let us know if you can tell. Maybe you can just do a quick restart there. I did get what you said, though. I think, yeah, I'll wait till you come back to respond to that. Let us know if you're having audio issues with both of us, folks. I see some people asking about the distinction between Wi-Fi 7 and 6E. So the headset is Wi-Fi 7, the dongle is Wi-Fi 6E. So you can theoretically be on Wi-Fi 7 for your internet connectivity, but for the wireless PC VR to the dongle, it's 6E. There's not really that much of a difference, to be honest with you. The main thing, Wi-Fi 6E introduced the new 6 gigahertz band, and that's what matters here. Getting that dedicated 6 gigahertz. It means you're not getting interfered with by the 5 gigahertz and 2.4 gigahertz um, now bands. Essentially, and I'm going to greatly simplify this for you, the lower the frequency when it comes to these three Wi-Fi bands, 2.4, 5, and 6 gigahertz, the lower the frequency, the further it will go distance-wise, the better it will penetrate solid objects. Okay? So 2.4 is what you connect to when you're really far away from your router, down the garden or through a bunch of walls. But that means you're going to get lower speeds. The higher frequency, it is worse at penetrating walls and it attenuates worse, so it goes less distance, but it gives you a higher quality, higher speed connection. So 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi is designed for point to point, pretty much for stuff where you're really near the router or the access point, or in this case, the dongle. And that's why it's so optimal, right? So you're getting this, it's not designed to go through walls. It's not designed to be good at that. It's designed to be really damn solid and really resistant to interference when you're in front of the PC. So this headset's designed to be used in the same room where your PC is, to be clear. In theory, can you, with this dongle, start to go to other rooms? Yeah, but your performance is going to get worse and worse the further you get away from the dongle. You're supposed to be within a line of sight of it. That's the main way you're supposed to use this.
There's there's so many examples that I've encountered over the last year. I'll take my Steam Deck and I want to leave my Steam Deck in my office, but I want to play it on Steam Link on my TV in my living room. And now I got to figure out how to route the gamepad inputs on my controller to the Steam Deck a whole room and a half away. And what I have is I don't know, a 15, 20-foot USB cord that runs into my hallway where I have a little dedicated receiver that becomes point to point basically between my controller and the Steam Deck. So I've routed controller input through my home as one example of just, I know there's people in our comments that have encountered that same situation of inputs lagging across their own home, and that's again one of the problems they're looking to solve here. I'm loving it. I do want to encourage you to hit the like button as we go into the third hour of the show, I guess.
I see a commenter here asking why not then go even higher to 60 gigahertz, right? Why not go even higher frequency like HTC's adapter? Well, when you go all the way to 6D gigahertz, 60, it becomes so bad at penetrating solid objects that you have to have direct line of sight between the transmitter and receiver. So that's why the HTC adapter, you kind of wore it on the top of your head and it was this big thing. And you had to really mount the transmitter up on your wall. With this, you just need rough line of sight. But if you duck behind a couch or someone walks between you and the PC, it's still going to work, right? It's still fine. It's not designed to go through solid concrete. But, with the HTC receiver, if your cat got in the way of the thing, the signal would come in there. And there was all these issues with it burned people's heads because it got so warm and all this nonsense. But so I think 6 gigahertz is the right trade-off. So that's one of the reasons. The other reason is cost. When you use regular Wi-Fi, you get access to the entire supply chain, right? All of these antennas and radios and all of these chips that are designed, it's built into the chip, the ability to understand this kind of Wi-Fi signal. You get to use for the dongle. They're building on the supply chains of Wi-Fi dongles that everyone uses in mobile devices. You would ramp up the cost by hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and you would need a solid line of sight. You need to mount something on your wall. And the whole point of this product in many ways is to get away from all that BS of having to mount shit on your walls and, put up cables. People just want a product that works. And the other thing is just it's gotten so good. These encoders, the codecs, all of this stuff has gotten so good that you just don't need it anymore. It's great. I was in City 17 and Half-Life Alyx, and it looked just as if it would have on a HP Reverb G2. There wasn't any difference in my demo.
Anti-cleric Blair out there, the creator of Lo-Fi, saying, "My time has come." And I appreciate that comment because Lo-Fi is kind of when you think about it, it's kind of the corner. It's kind of like the project that had no place to live. And Blair, good luck getting it performant on Steam Frame. But I am very curious to see what Lo-Fi looks like on Steam Frame and where that kind of lives inside of this ecosystem. Let's see if there's any comments here. There were several interesting comments. Where was it? Half-Life Alyx must look amazing on these displays. There's a lot of caveats to that, but yes, we're excited to see that. Nick Tater saying, did they cover any forthcoming updates to SteamVR's UI or SteamVR Home in anticipation of the Steam Frame launch, or is it going to look the same as it does today? Interestingly, we didn't see SteamVR Home. We didn't see that traditional interface you're familiar with. What they had was a compositor that just is like the OS system for showing you the different windows they have open. So it's more like the empty frame experience you experience before even going into SteamVR Home, and that's all we saw as the basic experience. Let's look through the comments here. I think David is disconnecting and coming back. Will foveated streaming work through Steam Link for Quest 3? One of the things that's a good question for David. I'm thinking of the actual adapter. One of the questions we asked was whether the adapter itself would work with other headsets, and that was like a not now, but maybe someone could do it type answer, I think. And then Blair out there saying, yes, it runs on Steam Deck, so it should be fine. So there's Lo-Fi. You're going to send us an email, Blair, of officially confirming Lo-Fi for Steam Frame. I would love to receive that email for you just to look at it. Let's see if there's any comments. Anything you want to talk about that you were thinking about before you disconnected there?
Yeah, there's a few things. Few things we want to talk about that are missing, I think. You talked about, this being VR first and you not caring about color pass-through, but just last week, you and I both talked about how amazing Laser Dance is, the first great mixed reality game. And so, while I keep saying this is a better PC VR headset and a better VR headset, you could even argue, than Quest 3, but there is something missing there in that you don't get that mixed reality content, right? You're not going to be able to play Cubism. Laser Dance on Steam Frame. Like, you're not. It needs multiple features that Steam Frame doesn't have. There are 3 features that it needs that Steam Frame doesn't have. So you can't play Laser Dance on this. So that is acknowledgement. And now that there's been one great mixed reality game that even you admit is great, maybe there's going to be more next year. Maybe we're going to see developers start to really, really understand this medium and come out with. I've heard good things about Little Critters. Henry found it be good, and I've heard some other people have found it good. It's a tower defense game where it's in your room, right? So you're placing these little towers around your living room, and the enemies are coming through the walls, and you can actually, if you're really in a rush, just go and splat them. I've heard some people say these are really great games, and I think on Vision Pro there's some.
So is Keepy Uppy, but just hitting a balloon in the air, right? Like that's a fun game too. It doesn't. So one of the issues I have, David, is I can't even get like plane detection from my tables reliably. Like, so I come in, I can only get laptop detection. What?
On what headset?
Today on Quest 3, the laptop is recognized as being here on my table because I sat at a table with level flooring. But if I go in my office, I don't think it would see my laptop here and represent the Quest 3. I don't think the Quest 3 would represent it. With the Muse Pen that I've been messing with, Touch Desk, for example, with Apple Vision Pro, it's really hard for it to find a level surface where it says, you're now synced up with your pen. Like, even getting a level surface where I'm syncing up my virtual content is a pain on all current hardware.
Sure, but Laser Dance works well. I tried it over the weekend. It works well.
The
It's a
one
fun
game,
game. It doesn't need a Logitech pen or a Surface. It turns your room into a laser course. Look, I'm not saying this is the end of the world. For a lot of people, mixed reality doesn't matter and they're not interested in it, but we have to acknowledge it that like it is one thing you got to know that if you buy a Quest 3, it's a VR headset and it's a mixed reality headset. If you buy a Steam Frame, it's a VR only headset. And again, for a lot of people, they say, great, I don't want any of that mixed reality nonsense. I just want to play my VR games. Great. But it is something that we actually do have to point out is valid, right? It is something that is there. Like Demio, for example, if you want certain co-located games, right? You played Pickle Pro, didn't you? Did you not? The
oh
other
yeah.
day with James, I think was it that you played
No, with Alex
with
over at
Alex? Sorry.
the New York holodeck. Yeah,
Yep. So you were playing this game, right? And you're in the same room playing pickleball. You can't do that with Steam Frame. You can do
yeah.
it in VR, but you know that's going to cause a lot of issues
So I'm
there.
not
And
gonna. Yes, it's so fair. I probably won't take this to the pickleball court. I probably won't take Steam Frame to the pickleball court. Maybe.
yeah,
That's a fair argument. But then again, what about Space Pirate Arena? Would you still be able to go in a controlled space with Space Pirate Arena here? Probably.
yeah, it's a VR game that uses this kind of space. I'm just pointing out that if you do care about mixed reality, it's something important. But let's not harp on about that too much. It is something that we need to acknowledge. The other missing feature that I think actually does maybe matter a bit more is hand tracking. We haven't said the phrase the entire episode. You frequently tell us how hand tracking is the default way you want to use a headset, and that the controller
Yeah,
should
you're
be
gonna get me
optional.
philosophical real fast on that. Yeah, keep
Yeah,
going.
look,
Yeah.
you tell us every week, and now we have a headset here that does not support hand tracking. To be clear,
Yep.
you need a controller for this. There's no controller-free hand tracking, so you can't play Cubism. Whether you do it in VR or mixed reality, you can't sit there and play it without having to have controllers in your hands the whole time. In VR chat, you can't have natural expressivity with your hands in the same way that you would with hand tracking. Any of these other use cases in games that you might use hand tracking in it aren't there. So it's something we need to acknowledge. I
Yep.
asked Valve a lot about this. I said, what about computer vision? And they said it's something they're working on, but fundamentally, Valve does not have the giant arsenal of computer vision experts that companies like Meta and Google and Apple do. So these features are going to come slower, and that's something we have to acknowledge. So
Yeah.
these are missing features that matter to some people, and that's all I'm saying. If they don't
Oh,
matter to you, great, you can ignore this part. I'm just saying if it does matter to you to have hand tracking, that's not something that is here in Steam Frame.
so fascinating discussion, and I'm seeing Not Suspicious out there. So Not Suspicious says, yeah, no hand tracking is a deal breaker for me too. So Not Suspicious has two very interesting hand tracking games, Banners and Bastions and Airspace Defender. As David has pointed out, I've been talking about them constantly on our shows because of how creative they are. To my philosophical thing, I've been struggling for about a month with how to talk about this. And I'm not going to do a good job on this podcast today. Um, Conceptually speaking, virtual reality exists whether your hands are there with you or not. You can use tools as a stand-in for your hand, and that's okay for plenty of people. But the implementation detail of whether your hands are these or whether they're represented by a controller that's held in your hand is secondary to the idea that VR is still a place for you to go to, whether or not you have tracked hands. So even though it's great and more immersive to use these digits I've got here, and Not Suspicious has one less surface for them to think about for their game because of the lack of hand tracking, then again, now we've got a unified Steam library, and every game is now compatible with those two controllers in theory. So I get both parts of this argument, right? And again, back to my philosophical thing, right? Like I didn't need hand tracking for a good 5 years there in VR's first days, from 2016 to 2020 or so. Tracked controllers were really, really wonderful.
You didn't need it, but look, I actually I'm very kind of bearish on hand tracking for gaming. I like the controllers for gaming. I like to always, if there's a game that uses hand tracking and controllers, there's two reasons that the hand tracking are important for me. One is social VR. And since actually 2014, 11 years ago, I was strapping a Leap Motion in front of my Oculus DK2 to get hand tracking in alt space and VR chat, right? I was doing hand tracking 11 years ago. And from 11 years ago, I said, this is the way, if I'm hanging out with someone in VR, right? If you're in VR chat, just having a conversation with someone, or alt space that's dating me, whatever social platform you want, I if you're having a long conversation, right now we're having a, I don't know, 2-3 hour conversation, however long we've been in here. And I don't want to have to hold controllers the whole time to touch the tablet and be expressive. We
Yeah.
have our hand tracking here. Do you want to use a controller? Would you have wanted to hold a controller this entire time? So that's one usage. The other,
No, you're
well,
Nate. You're yeah.
let me just finish. Let me just finish. So that's one usage. Social VR is so much better with hand tracking. Number two is when you combine it with eye tracking, gaze and pinch. We both talk about this every week. It's amazing that like you talk about the advantages and then Valve doesn't have it, and these advantages all disappear into the ether. You know, hand and eye tracking together. You've talked about this, and I've talked about this. If you're playing a strategy game, a tower defense game, Demio or Gears and Goo, where you have kind of the game board in front of you, you don't want to hold controllers the whole time and point. You want to look with your eyes and pinch with your fingers. And I play Vision Pro games like that. You do too. They're great. So that's where hand tracking becomes essential when it's combined with eye tracking. I saw a commenter here say that this is very like Frankensteinish, that I don't think we've actually ever seen a headset like this that has eye tracking but no hand tracking, that's standalone at the very least. Can't think of one that's been standalone and has never. I saw some people actually shocked in the comments and saying, I thought hand tracking was just a given.
Mhm.
We have a spec sheet in our article where we point out all these things. But yeah, I don't know. If you want to fundamentally play PC VR games, it doesn't matter that much. If you want to start doing some of these more interesting seated use cases in social VR, it does start to matter. But one thing I want to point out here is, as the commenters are saying, people will probably hack it together. They can just run computer vision models on this camera. I would be shocked if within a couple of months we don't have an open source software solution for hand tracking. How well that's implemented is a different question.
Yeah, God, there were so many thoughts I was just having. And Nick is asking, will you be able to use one controller? Absolutely. I used Walkabout. I played Walkabout with one controller, completely standard. And I noticed the Steam button is on both controllers. So the Steam, you should be able to get to the Steam menu from either controller, where you have to either flip it one way or the other on the Oculus controllers. I love that little bit. Yeah, let's see if there's any. There were some comments here I really wanted to respond to. Um, yeah, people still on pass through and wishing for color pass through. Where the use cases that you're talking about, like I get that. Like I love being able to gesture to you. Where I was going to push back you, where I was going to interrupt was last week I had a pen in here, but I couldn't do anything with it, right? It was represented as a controller in the secondary mode that you want. But 100%, David, I want to be able to reach at any time for a pen here and then write on this wall right here and highlight things and point as a laser pointer at different things here. And I want to be able to use a tool for all sorts of things. A controller can do that in some instances. It can't do it very well.
But what do you want your other hand to do? So in Steam Frame, you're in this experience right now. Say this is ported to Steam Frame. You pick up one controller. Is your other hand just going to be limp like this on the ground, or do you want to just be floating in the air up here? Like, where's the
or
other
like
hand go?
Walkabout does it, where they don't represent anything; they just show the one controller.
How's that going to work with these avatars, right? Do you want me to chop off one of your arms? Like, what do you want to do there?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the pill bottle person, right? We don't have any appendages.
Look, it's interesting because, like, in theory, like, I think because of the comfort, I actually would want to use this studio in Steam Frame. I keep saying this, like, I don't want to be too negative. I really like this headset. I think the ergonomics are downright beautiful. Like, it's so comfortable and so well made. But do I want to not have hand tracking? That's a huge trade-off. If overnight, like, they add hand tracking, this would be I would want to be in here with it. but
I get what
I'm
you're
not
saying.
spending 3 hours holding VR controllers and touching this tablet with my, virtual fingers rather than my real fingers. The day that we added hand tracking to this it made this experience so much better.
But I mean, we are actively talking, right? We are actively talking with one another for these hours, and the use case is so different, where the controllers are just at your side, right here, right? They're resting, and you're tapping all these buttons all day on a Steam Deck game, right? That's a completely
Yeah,
different
look,
use case. The one of the most exciting games out there right now is Dimensional Double Shift from Alchemy Labs. That's their newest project, completely from the ground up, based around hand tracking and social interaction and room code, finding other people online to have this natural interaction, completely absent from Galaxy XR's launch event. And here we are on another headset here where it shouldn't work, right? Because it's all hand tracking based. And it's like, where is Google's next? Where is Google's latest game? When is that game going to run on a headset again? So yes, I'm a big believer in hand tracking, but I got to go back to the philosophical thing of just, if I pick my nose, I don't want you to know it.
I mean, look,
Like,
there, yeah.
like
So
that's what I'm getting at, right? Like, turning off my hand tracking and turning on my environmental tracking is a huge logistical, like, it's overhead that
do you
I
want to
don't
see me?
necessarily
Do you
want
want
to
to see
pay
me
for.
pick my nose in 5 seconds? Strange thing I never thought I'd say in the podcast. Oh,
Yeah.
look, I'm doing it right now. Look, I've just turned off my hand tracking and body tracking by pinching
And
and bringing up the meta menu,
did
and
you
I've
hit
done it.
you pressed a button on the side of your headset for
No,
that, right?
I just pinch like this, just instantly pinch, and there you go. My hand tracking turns off, and I'm here in the menu. You can probably
Picking
see
my
me.
nose was the most polite way of saying I don't necessarily want my body tracked in VR. I'd like it to be an active choice every time I do so. And one way to make it an active choice every time I do so is to pick up controllers every time I want to track my body movement. That's it.
Oh, so
There's
but I mean,
advantages to both.
okay. Look. I want to just come back and contextualize. I don't think that the lack of hand tracking matters for gaming, but this is just cope. It does matter for social VR. Of course, it does. It's much more expressive to be able to have this, and you can turn it off at any time. I just demonstrated it. Look, I'm turned it off. You're still hearing me, but you're not seeing my hands. I could be making all kinds of rude gestures. I could be picking both my nostrils right now. None of you would ever know, and all I got to do is tap, and look, I'm back. I've, you know.
It's funny. Yeah, people are saying we're getting punchy. We might close it down here soon, but we do have 250 people watching, and a lot of new people that are like strolling in, just waking up and realizing that Deckard and Steam Frame are the same thing. They actually exist. They're real. The copium is happening. Like, when David and I fight, we're not really fighting with each other. What we're fighting with is like the ideas that so many of people in our audience are grasping with. And we're like doing straw man discussions back and forth with one another to try to like get at what is actually happening here. What is valuable for you, the viewer, to understand. And so, like, David is absolutely 100% right about the value of hand tracking. I have an article that's like a year and a half old on our website from the creator of Job Simulator saying you need to have a plan for hand tracking. And a bunch of developers who are controller tracking only went, I'm happy with controller tracking, right? Like, both of those viewpoints have validity, right?
No, I agree with you. I see a lot of commenters saying that they actually appreciate our discussion. Like we could do the thing that some podcasts do, where we all just do this toxic fake positivity, and every time I say something, Ian hates. He says, "Oh God, that's such a great point," and I say, "That's such a great point," and none of you would hear anything other than just meaningless platitudes, and we wouldn't get to any interesting debates. But I think why people like this show, I hope at least, is that we don't do that. We respect each other, but we respect each other enough to disagree with each other. That's actually a very important thing. I think That's like what we want to do on this podcast. We want to have the debates. I want to know what Ian thinks. I want to hear when he disagrees with me. I want to hear his take, and I want to hear the audience's take. I want us to actually get to the core of these issues, not dance around them. We're not here for meaningless platitudes. We're here to understand this medium, this technology, the developers, the companies, and that means sometimes it's going to get a little bit feisty, a little bit fiery. But I think that makes for a better discussion that gets us closer to the real truth here.
I,
I'm going to have to go in 5 minutes, by the way, so we're going to
yeah.
have to clean this up pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think we're probably good here to just echo what David just said, right? People in our comments already are seeing Steam Frame reviewed, right? Like people in our comments saying, "I saw a Steam Frame review." And you want to get David and I punchy? You want to get us mad, right? You start talking about reviewing a product that isn't out for 6 or 9 months yet.
Yes.
Like,
So, yeah, look, folks, for people who aren't familiar, we are big proponents of the idea that a review is something that you put out after you've had a product in your real home for days or weeks. And actually, if you go to uploadvr.com, you'll see that I put out my review yesterday of the Meta Ray-Ban display glasses after using it almost all day, every day for a month. That's how you review something. So nobody has reviewed Steam Frame because they have not had it in their home. What they have done is done the same thing that we did. They went to Valve headquarters and they got to try it for a couple of dozen minutes in Valve's headquarters under controlled conditions with Valve's headsets and Valve's PCs. That's a hands-on impressions piece. There's hands-on impressions and there are reviews. Those are different things. And there are a lot of products that can either seem like they have huge issues or have huge positives that it turns out once you get into your home, things aren't so rosy or things are way, way better and these things weren't issues. And so take a hands-on impressions piece as giving you a basic idea of a product, but wait for real reviews. And a real review is not somebody trying something out for half an hour and then reading you the bullet points that they were given or, giving you the view that they already had and the script they already wrote before they tried it. It's having it in their real home, seeing how does this work in real lighting and real conditions and on my PC that wasn't set up fresh yesterday and all of these considerations, all of the little tiny factors that are different between a hands-on demo at a headquarters or a PR room versus in the real world. That said, I do want to acknowledge something before we go off that I really appreciated the approach that Valve took to this. Most companies, we talk to their PR people. Valve let us talk to their engineers. They give us the freedom to ask real questions, to get real details. You can see it in our articles on uploadvr.com, where we are giving you the details that we got from speaking to these Valve employees, asking them about why did you do this? Why did you do that? What were the decisions you made here? What's your goal? And so thank you to Valve for actually letting us speak to the people who made the product. No thank you to the other companies, some other companies that get us to talk to a PR person who, again, it comes down to this platitudes versus reality thing. So much of the modern world is all, pleasant bullshit that doesn't mean anything. What we were able to get at this Valve trip was real answers and real conversations.
yeah, absolutely need to echo all of that. Really do appreciate the access we got there to Valve directly. They said it flat out to us. When you go back to your copium dens, and try to figure out what Valve's next steps are. What they told us is that when they are ready to announce something, they will send us an email and we will get an invite to go check it out. And that's what we're going to now go back and wait for, right? They're going to send us an email when they're ready for review units. That's the current plan. And we will make our plans for coverage then. Will be hard after the facts that are out there that escape into public. We will work our best to verify everything we possibly can. Thank you to all the new subscriptions and the thumbs up and everyone who is tuning into VR for the first time today. I'm looking over here to see if there's any last discussions for us, but I am appreciating everyone sort of responding to our discussion over first impressions and hands-on. We as reporters, we want to put everything we possibly can on the page. We want to give you all the context you possibly can. There's a lot of, there's a lot of people out there that could try to go the clickbait route or try to, make this last months of coverage on their website. And we're trying to give you as much as we possibly can right now of what we experienced, the inspiring parts of it, the things that we don't know if they're going to work, the reasons why you might not want to purchase this now, might want to, we all want the Steam Frame Pro. We all want the OLED display. And we just spent a couple hours here talking about why, Valve couldn't make those decisions right now. Guy out there saying, thank you for the stream. Nice to hear your feedback about new devices when they're released. Thank you for being out there, and go read our articles. David and I have done some very hard work, very late nights to try to get those articles out there, while David is also, have Galaxy XR and an M5 Vision Pro, which you're going to go back to.
Yeah.
That's hell, right? Like, that's exciting, but also that's a little bit of hell.
Busiest 2-month period in our entire history. So Ian's right. We have been working some crazy late nights. We have been lacking sleep, but again, it's such an exciting period. We've just had the first consumer viable HUD glasses. We have the M5 Vision Pro with Vision OS 26, right? Vision OS 26, including those spatial personas, the first viable photorealistic face-tracked avatars. We got Galaxy XR introducing Android XR from Google, right? Now we have Steam Frame from Valve, and we were obviously contending with this. This visit was weeks ago. We were contending with this while we were trying to get all our other coverage out. As Ian is suggesting, it's a blessing and a curse that we are in the busiest period of this industry's history. Again, as I said before a few weeks ago, it's such a different view than the kind of mainstream idea that, VR was this thing years ago and it's dying out now. No, you have Valve, Samsung, Google, Apple, Meta, and other companies jumping in, going for bigger and better. And yeah, we think 2026 is going to be even bigger.
VR is so dead that it ate Apple and it ate Valve and it ate Google. All of them are throwing all of their companies, everything they are, into VR.
That actually reminds me of something that Palmer Luckey said in an interview recently, which I found fascinating. He said that everyone has this idea that Facebook absorbed Oculus. And actually, no, if you look what happened over the totality of time, Oculus absorbed Facebook. Facebook became this hardware company. It changed its name to Meta. It bet, tens of billions of dollars on VR. I found that a really, really interesting perspective from Palmer Luckey. And you can see this happening at some of these other companies too, right? With the Vision Products Group, at Apple, the guy who ran it is now, taking on the new Siri project in AI. And I think it is an actual very interesting perspective that there's something about VR and AR that does, as you say, eat the rest of the companies in a way that is going to be quite obvious over time.
Yeah, it's almost funny. The terminology debate is almost happens because the companies realize, everything we do has to go in here. Everything we do is going to be touched by this, and so now we can't call it what everyone else calls it. We got to call it a new thing. So go back and read Intel merged reality in 2016, or go into Steam VR in a Steam Frame in 2026. This, all of Steam is now in VR. It's wild.
Just one comment I want to respond to just before we go here. I see Not Suspicious saying, counterpoint for David, Oculus was more gaming focused like Valve, where Meta is more mobile AR metaverse focused. I got to do my rant. I'm sorry, I got to do my rant. Valve has confirmed that it's not working on a new VR game. Meanwhile, in the last 2 years, Meta has released Asgard's Wrath 2 and Batman Arkham Shadow, and we're in the month where the big gaming release is going to be a Marvel Deadpool game. And so the company, like, if I were to, without context, and you didn't know anything about these industries, describe to you that people call the company that hasn't made a game in 5 years the gaming focused company, and the company that's coming out with a blockbuster game every year, including a Marvel Deadpool game this month. I think it's like next week or something. I don't know, the date. November 17th is in my head. I'm not the games person. I don't know. I think that would be such a strange kind of thought. I think we are always in this topsy-turvy world where Valve becomes the gaming company by never making a game, and Meta becomes the non-gaming focused company by putting out a AAA VR blockbuster every year. And I don't understand how that is. I don't understand how the circle is squared there, but that's somehow the reality we're in.
I think we'll get some of that out in our quotes over time. Go read my article where we quote Valve at length, and they discuss the idea of unlocking value with open source. And I don't know. There's so many debates for us to have in the future about what is open source. Is Valve open? Um, and it takes us right back to 2016 and Revive and all those things that happened back there. We'll have a fun couple of months discussing this. I do want to encourage you to hit the like button, leave a comment after the show, send a signal out there of this new chapter in the VR story opening out there with this episode. We had some of our best viewership that we've ever had on this week's show, which, we didn't advertise the show at all. We just popped in here and we ended up with 300 people watching us almost for 3 hours. A lot of you had the same questions, but they were all great questions. I'm going to finish this by just echoing thank you to Valve for that access, getting us those demos. I need to also just say it was such a breath of fresh air to hear from the people directly involved in these projects, why they're passionate about them, what the decisions were. We have not had that kind of access elsewhere, and it really mattered here. So thank you. We'll see you in the
Thanks so much,
future.
everyone. We really appreciate you being here for this conversation. I'm sure we'll have weeks and weeks of discussion about this. Please comment under our articles. It's the easiest way to get us to see what you're saying and get a response. Thanks so much, everyone.
Bar
Great
says,
discussion.
can't wait for VR download tomorrow. No, this is instead of VR download.
No,
I do not
actually,
plan.
we haven't decided. I
What?
think I'm going to do one for my Meta Ray-Ban review, but
Oh, that's fair.
yeah.
Yeah. So you're just going to get in here and freestyle it?
Yeah, pretty much. So that's the
All
plan,
right.
is to talk about the Meta Ray-Ban review tomorrow.
The David Heaney 3 hour special with the display glasses will be tomorrow. Have fun with that.
Yeah.
We'll see you in the future.
Thanks so much, everyone. Yeah, I keep saying the busiest period of our entire career, but it's great. We love it. Thanks so much for being here with us. We'll see you in the future.